I never had to count my blessings, but these days I do. Originally I know they find trouble, but these days I do. Yeah. Cause it's a lonely road, and the only road never suffer lonely. I know they find trouble, but these days I do. Oh, them a bring me voodoo, but I thank Jehovah for the journey. Oh, joy comes in the morning. I let bad mind close to a story. Hey, I got so many secrets that I pray don't come out. Paranoid cause I've seen things go bad when my family done to demons around me. Yeah, yeah.
Thank you for everything, everything you've done for me. And now I give a praise to majesty, and I say thank you. Thank you Lord for everything, everything you've done for me. And now I give a praise to majesty, and I say thank you.
History, but shaping the conversations that define Africa's future. For brands, media planning, and advertisers, Channel Africa is more than just a platform. It's an opportunity. With 25 compelling shows covering current affairs, sports, business, music, and lifestyle, we deliver an engaging Pan-African audience ready to connect, invest, and act. Multi-award winning, internationally recognized, digitally accessible across the globe. When Africa speaks, the world listens, and Channel Africa makes sure of it. For business, for culture, for Africa, partner with Channel Africa because Africa's voice is the future. Africa is a story.
Do it. It's Africa Rise and Shine here on Channel Africa on this Friday. It's the 23rd of May. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Asanda Beda. And of course, we've got a lot to cover in this coming hour. But we are with you until 9 this morning. So 3 hours of bringing you all the news that you need to know about your continent, as well as what's happening around it that may affect our continent. So we are broadcasting live from Johannesburg in South Africa. And we are on DSTV channel 802. On OpenView, channel 628, and on www.channelafrica.co.za. Also live streaming, so if you're seeing us on the screen, well, thank you for joining us in that platform as well. Our social media handles are at Channel Africa 1 on the different places and spaces that you can connect with us. Besides live streaming, you can also just send your comments and your questions about the show. We love to hear from you. Coming up, we'll talk about tropical forests in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, which have recently been captured by rebel forces, and they are experiencing a surge in illegal logging and on charcoal and timber. And also credit rating expert Thorsten Hinrichs saying African regulators and politicians should promote a ratings culture to boost access to funding. That's going to be part of our Africa Roundup. Of course, we've got that meeting happening between South Africa's President Ramaphosa and US's President Trump. So we'll give you updates in terms of what's the latest on those chat. Of course, more will be coming up, not just those that I gave you a snippet of. But in the meantime, let's start with the news and say good morning to Onele Nzinzi, and then she'll be followed by Musibudi Makura with the sports headlines.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And a very good morning to our listeners. Tanzania has released a Kenyan activist who had been arrested after he tried to attend a hearing in the treason case against a detained opposition leader in Dar es Salaam. The Kenya National Commission on Human Rights said it had received Boniface Mwangi in Kenya's southeastern county. Kenya's Foreign Minister Musalia Mudavadi also confirmed Mwangi's release. Tabiso Luhuku reports.
Rights activist Hussein Khalid has tweeted that Boniface Mwangi has been severely tortured by Tanzanian security agents and could barely walk. Mwangi had attempted to observe opposition leader Tundu Lissu's first court appearance on Monday in a case that has spotlighted a growing crackdown on opponents of President Samir Suluhu Hassan. He was arrested on allegations of providing false information to gain entry into the country. Lissu, who was shot 16 times in a 2017 attack and came second in Tanzania's last presidential poll, was charged with the treason in April over what prosecutors said was a speech calling on the public to rebel and disrupt elections due in October.
The Premier of South Africa's Gauteng province, Panyaza Lesufi, has congratulated the South African delegation led by President Cyril Ramaphosa for the way they handled the meeting with US President Donald Trump at the White House. Lesufi was addressing members of a media in Johannesburg. He touched on a number of issues, including Gauteng preparedness to host the G20 summit and the filling of potholes. Lesufi says President Ramaphosa and the team represented South Africa well.
I'm very pleased that the president really went there open-minded, made us proud, and we want to thank the entire delegation across. Obviously it was tense, difficult, but I think the country can be proud now that indeed our president came out of that session smelling roses and ready to then execute the trade relations that we want, which is very important to us.
South Africa's presidency has meanwhile clarified why the special envoy Mcebisi Jonas was not part of the president's delegation to the US. The presidency says he was left out at his own request, but he contributed to the preparatory engagements ahead of the meeting. The presidency has also added that Jonas has valid travel documents to the US. Questions have arisen on whether he did not travel because of his views on the President of the United States, which have been critical. A delegation from the United Kingdom visiting South Africa's parliament say they will try to find out why leader of the Economic Freedom Fighters Julius Malema's visa application was delayed when he was to travel to Britain 2 weeks ago. Their delegation met with MPs on Parliament's Defence Portfolio and International Relations Committee. The group, made up of MPs from both members of the Conservative and Labour parties, met with their South African counterparts to engage on various international alliances and defence partnerships. The EFF's Carl Niasen had asked the delegation about the recent incident. Malema was scheduled to address the Africa Together conference at Cambridge University. One of the UK delegates, Syed Kamal, a member of the House of Lords, says they are aware of the matter.
It's been raised with us. By the way, we are different parties, we're not supporting the government, and that's not an excuse, that's just a fact. And what we will do, we will raise it to our British Consul tonight to find out the fact. From what I know, and this is not official, I do not think there's any policy to exclude some of the EFF. I suspect, frankly, maybe I shouldn't say this is on camera, but we know what bureaucracies are like, and sometimes, frankly, it could well have been a result of bureaucracy. But we will take that back.
Lastly, North Korean state media says a serious accident occurred during the launch ceremony of a naval destroyer. The North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is said to have personally witnessed the incident. The BBC's David Bamford.
진수 과정에 미숙한 지휘와
A stern North Korean state television newsreader tells the nation that operational carelessness was behind the accident that led to panels of the warship's hull being crushed as it headed down the slipway. An angry and presumably embarrassed North Korean leader, Kim Jong-un, called it a criminal act that could not be tolerated. The accident took place at a shipyard in the eastern port city of Chongjin. Last month, North Korea launched its first 5,000-ton destroyer, the Chohyun, by far the largest in its naval fleet.
Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news, Osawa CAF officially reveals the newly designed CAF Champions League trophy during an unveiling ceremony in Johannesburg, South Africa on Thursday, while Luka Modric set to leave Real Madrid after the FIFA Club World Cup. Details coming up. at 6:30.
Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 Central African Time on Channel Africa.
Let's thank the team. On technical production is Dumelo Mukwena here on Africa Rise and Shine. On news, you just heard the Onel Nsinzi. On sports, Musubudi Makura. Later on, we'll get our economics update with Buntle Headbush. On production is Slengiwe Mabaso, Joey Likhodi, and Pumuzo Ramakadza. On social media is Talent Butelezi. Let's take a roundup now of stories that you need to bring to your attention that you might have missed. And this is part of our Africa Roundup, which happens every day after the 6 o'clock news. Britain signed a deal on Thursday to cede sovereignty of the Chagos Islands to Mauritius. We start there. This is after a London judge overturned a last-minute injunction and cleared the way for an agreement the government says is vital to protect the nation's security.
The multi-billion-dollar deal will allow Britain to retain control of the strategically important US-UK airbase on Diego Garcia under a 99-year lease. Lawyers representing Beatrice Pomp, a British national born in the Chagos Islands, were granted an interim injunction at the High Court in the early hours of Thursday. She had criticised the deal for excluding Chagosians in any communication, but following the hearing, the injunction was lifted as the judge said Britain's interests would be substantially prejudiced if it continued. Outside court on Thursday, Pomp and fellow Chagosians vowed to continue to fight the deal.
Tropical forests in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, recently captured by rebel forces, are experiencing a surge in illegal logging of charcoal and timber, raising concerns about widespread environmental damage, according to residents and environmentalists. The Kahuzi-Biega National Park, a UNESCO World Heritage Site located west of Bukavu, the region's second largest city, fell under the control of Rwanda-backed M23 rebels in February.
Environmental activist Josue Aruna warns that the charcoal boom is coming at a steep ecological cost.
At least 3,000 bags enter Bukavu city daily or head towards Goma. If this continues, we will lose the UNESCO World Heritage Site, this park which is the particular habitat of eastern lowland gorillas, the Grauras gorillas. We took the initiative to contact them through an advocacy note addressed to the authorities in North Kivu and South Kivu. We asked them to become more involved because if the situation continues this way, we risk losing Kahuzi-Biega National Park.
A UK parliamentary delegation visiting South Africa's parliament says it will investigate why EFF leader Julius Malema's visa to Britain was delayed. Malema was set to speak at Cambridge University 2 weeks ago, but was unable to travel. UK delegate Lord Syed Kamau confirmed they are aware of the issue and will follow up.
It's been raised with us. By the way, we are different parties, we're not supposed to work with the government, and that's not an excuse, that's just a fact. And what we will do, we will raise it to our British Consul tonight to find out the fact. From what I know, and this is not official, I do not think there's any policy to exclude some of the EFF. I suspect, frankly, maybe I shouldn't say this is on camera, but we know what bureaucracies are like, and sometimes, frankly, it could well have been a result of bureaucracy. But we will take that back.
Credit rating expert Torsten Henrich says African regulators and politicians should promote a ratings culture to boost access to funding. Speaking at the Africa Annual Credit Ratings Conference in Cape Town, he stressed its role in unlocking domestic bond markets. The conference ended with a focus on strengthening credit rating practices across the continent.
To, for example, create a pan-African regulator for the ratings industry, just like the Europeans have done some years ago, some 10, 15 years ago, with an institution called ESMA, and that's a European-wide regulator for the ratings industry, creating a level playing field across Europe for the industry. I think that would go a long way also in creating this credit and ratings culture in Africa.
Finally, scientists have found that ancient Egyptian mummified bodies emit woody, spicy, and sweet aromas, offering fresh insights into the mummification process, practices, and materials. David Doyle has more.
Dr. Cecilia Bembe-Bray of UCL's Bartlett School of Environment, Energy and Resources said the studies helped them better understand the embalming process.
We found smells corresponding to plant oils, such as cedar and juniper, for example.
The study involved researchers collecting samples of air from the sarcophagi of 9 mummified bodies at the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. And Bembe-Bray says there's more to this study than simply the odour of long-dead Egyptians.
One of the innovative contributions of this study is to the emerging field of olfactory heritage. And this studies how, using our nose, we can learn more about history and heritage. We can communicate the significance of our heritage better.
Interesting times indeed. Who's sniffing on mummies? And how do you collect air? Interesting. Well, that's scientists for you. And that's how we come to the end of today's segment of the Africa Roundup.
Hey there, this is Balisa Tau, part of the dynamic duo that gives you On the Move right here on Channel Africa from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. Central Africa time. Well, it's with your help for the past 2 years that we have been a multi-award winning show.
Well, yeah, we're keeping it on the move in 2025. And yes, I'm the other half of the duo, Benjamin Mushatama. And we're going to keep you going with the great conversations. Turn it up.
Okay. On the Move comes back in 2025 to give you more of the content that made us a Maldo and to deliver that bold, boundary-pushing content that you love. And of course, giving you a ride through the 3 hours of news, views, and entertainment.
Every weekday from 9 to midday Central African time, right here on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Cool.
Let's go.
Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
15 minutes past 6 Central African time. One of the stories that matter is South Africa's ANC Secretary General Fikile Mbalula, who has described President Cyril Ramaphosa's visit to the United States a mission accomplished. The meeting came after months of mounting tension between the two countries following genocide claims by a group of Afrikaners, whom some of them have since been given refugee status by the Trump administration. Ramaphosa led a delegation of 4 ministers, some business people, and labor on a working visit to Washington to reset bilateral relations between the two republics. But the meeting has been met with mixed reactions from political parties back home. Ntebo Mkobo has more.
After months of tense relations between Pretoria and Washington, this week's meeting between President Ramaphosa and his U.S. counterpart Donald Trump marked a turning point for relations between the two republics. Speaking to the SABC News, ANC Secretary General Fikile Mbalula says the meeting was a success and that the president must be commended for the job well done.
I think we may want to characterize yesterday as mission accomplished because many things have been said about South Africa. It took the head of state to go to White House to sit down with President Trump and to put the record straight for the first time face to face. And President must be applauded for that. He's doing it for his country. He's not doing it for himself, to protect the interests of South Africans. And I think yesterday resetting the button meant that the diplomatic channels, the proper channels of engaging will actually be opened up from yesterday. So it's a great achievement for South Africa.
However, not everyone shares his sentiments. Trump's concern over an alleged white genocide came into sharp focus, wherein he even presented videos of the EFF and the MK party singing anti-white songs. The EFF has since criticized the meeting, claiming it focused more on discrediting the EFF and its leader than focusing on diplomatic relations and trade.
We are going to continue to chant through the working the farmer. We are going to continue to pursue constitutional and legislative mechanisms to expropriate the land without compensation. And we're going to backtrack on that, whether Donald Trump is calling for the arrest of Julius Malema or not. We have the sovereign right to pursue redress in this country to fix the injustice of the past, and this includes solving the unequal patterns of land distribution. We are going to continue to oppose the presence of Starlink, which belongs to Elon Musk in South Africa.
For its part, the MK party says President Cyril Ramaphosa should have used the occasion to account for the dollars found on his Palapala farm in 2020, as party spokesperson Ndlamulo Ndlela explains.
What you have there sitting next to Donald Trump is a fugitive from justice.
What should be happening is that they should be prosecuting him for and letting him and asking him to actually respond as to how was he found with all those dollars in his couch, and also then account according to the international law of the US, which is the FCPA. This is what should be happening here, because they are sitting with a person who has caused criminality, and that farm of his is a crime scene.
The MK party had previously called on the Trump administration to investigate the farm robbery, where approximately $580 was stolen from Ramaphosa's farm. The Freedom Front Plus leader Corne Meldero, on the other hand, says that although painful things were brought to light, it was necessary to bring out the much-needed change.
South Africa was exposed last night before the eyes of the world as a country plagued by violence, with a struggling economy, collapsing infrastructure and widespread stagnation. That was the outcome of the conversation between President Ramaphosa and President Trump, and as a South African, it was rather painful to witness. It's necessary to understand that South Africa will not be successful economically as long as we continue with outdated race-based economic policies such as BEE, affirmative action, as well as expropriation without compensation.
Meanwhile, President Ramaphosa says a number of meetings with different South African ministers and their American counterparts is in their offing to iron out some of the outstanding issues, including trade and investment. I am Tebo Mokobe in Johannesburg.
Women-led businesses and organizations gathered in Johannesburg, South Africa on Wednesday to share, connect and reflect on the evolving world of philanthropy, especially how women-led initiatives are shaping resilient and sustainable financial models. The event was hosted by Women in Philanthropy South Africa, or WIPSA. Sisi Sekalo was in attendance and has more on the story.
Women in Philanthropy South Africa, WIPSA, is a network of people who are active in the social and development sector who come together to connect, learn, collaborate and inspire in order to increase the impact in the sector. WIPSA says more than ever, women must embrace models that reflect the realities of the communities they serve, models that are sustainable, responsive and grounded in lived experiences. The event, sponsored by Investec, brought together a network of women for an interactive session. Snenhlanhla Nene, who's the steering committee member at WIPSA Johannesburg, explains what the gathering was about.
We actually wanted my version of a goodie bag is, when people can actually leave feeling, re-energized, because sometimes social impact work is draining. To meet other women who are sharing experiences, who, especially in a climate where things are changing. I mean, 1 minute an organization has funding, the next minute Donald Trump wakes up and he decides that there's no funding anymore. What do you do in a situation like that? It helps build resilient organizations as well to change with the times. COVID happened. Were we ready for that? Our organizations ready? So what do we do to not just reinvent the wheel, but also change the social impact space and the landscape so that we're able to drive real impact, real meaningful change?
Women who were in attendance shared their insights in a session facilitated by Robin Whittaker, co-founder of Africa Voices Dialogue. She shares what the session titled Grounded Philanthropy was about.
I was invited to facilitate because in our Africa Voices Dialogue work, we really think about what it takes to get meaningful change to happen on our continent and for our continent and with our continent. And some time ago, we ran a dialogue on flow-based resourcing, which was really to consider what does it take? What are all the things that it takes in order for change to be facilitated, for positive change to be facilitated? And this morning was a little bit of a build on that. So really supporting us to think beyond the constructs that we have in place about how change happens and what is required, and to help us to move into a much more real space of perceiving and understanding what really is happening in the systems that we're part of. How are we experiencing them? How are we positioned within them? What are the resources that are available to us in order to allow those systems to become generative?
Teresa Michael is the co-founder of Africa Tukum Bambanani, an organization which operates in the early childhood development space. She says the organization over the past 4 years have worked with over 600 ECD centers, trained and upskilled over 3,000 practitioners. She also benefited something from the event.
The takeaway of our session today is to be real, to go down to grassroots, to see what is happening on the ground, and for funders to realize that they can't just throw money at a specific cause. They need to find out within that cause what exactly is required. What do the people on the ground need? What are the fundamentals of what is required to make a change? And how do we make that change?
Another organization which was represented in the session was Pola, a non-profit entity having its footprint in Gauteng and Mpumalanga provinces. Nomalizo Kabana is the deputy director of the non-profit organization. She also shares what she took from the event.
I could sense the warmth from the women. I just spoke to Robin just now, just expressing my appreciation of how she facilitated the session. I believe she created a space where women can come in, let down their guards, because we are always guarded as women. But in that space, I felt people were open to engage. And it was nicely layered. You know, as one of the ladies I was speaking to, she didn't upfront say this is what's going to happen. She took us through a journey which was gently navigated of identifying the challenges that are in our space, coming up with solutions in our respective spaces. And we got an opportunity as well to network with each other.
The event was also a platform for women to network with each other for future collaborations. For Channel Africa, I'm Sisi Sikhalo in Johannesburg, South Africa.
In celebration of International Day for Biological Diversity, South Africa's Department of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment is hosting a 2-day National Biodiversity Offset Conference in Johannesburg. The 2-day event, which ends today, has gathered biodiversity and offset specialists, environmental assessment practitioners, competent authorities, commenting authorities, developers and non-governmental organizations under one roof, with the aim of enhancing the implementation and transparency of biodiversity offset processes within the country. Tuto Ngobeni compiled this report.
The conference is hosted in collaboration with the United Nations Development Programme, UNDP, and is supported by the South African National Biodiversity Institute, SANBI, and the South African National Parks, SANParks. During the conference, the Director General at South Africa's Department of Forest, Fisheries and Environment, Nomfundo Chabalala, officiated the launch of the National Biodiversity Offset web portal and the SANParks Proactive Biodiversity Offset Scheme. The Biodiversity Finance Initiative, supported by UNDP and spearheaded by the department in collaboration with SANParks and SANBI, seeks to develop innovative financial solutions for the expansion and effective management of protected areas. The National Biodiversity Offset Guidelines was published in June 2023. The guideline, established under the National Environmental Management Act, provides a comprehensive framework for mitigating the adverse impacts of development on the nation's biodiversity. Shabalala says the tools will ensure balance, which is critical in conserving the environment.
So basically, this event is a conference, and this conference will be going through the tools that have been developed. As South Africa, we are a mega diverse or natural country. And we need to conserve this. And obviously we understand that as a country we need to develop, but it's critical while we're developing, we need to conserve our ecosystems. And why we do that, we are pursuing an environment that is healthy, an environment that's good for everyone's well-being.
The Southern African nation is recognized globally as a mega-diverse country which boasts an extraordinary array of biodiversity that is integral to the nation's health, well-being, and economic vitality. Shabalala says the website will play a key role in showcasing the country's landscape and indicate where development is happening and if there's an investment in offsetting.
So basically, the first is the website. And I think the workshop, the conference is going to demonstrate the website, showing geographically the landscape of South Africa. And it is going to indicate where there's development and what is it then as you develop an area, what is it then you are actually investing in order to offset, to ensure that you do not deplete conservation in as far as that area is concerned. So different provinces, across the country, you will be able then to be in a position to, the individual IPs and implementers and stakeholders will be inputting information through this website, and as the department and entities will be able to see what is happening and are we really offsetting what has been taken out of our natural resources. Is it being offset?
The South African National Biodiversity Institute, SANBI, is an organization tasked with research and dissemination of information on biodiversity and legally mandated to contribute to the management of the country's biodiversity resources. Chief Executive Officer Shonisani Munjedzi says they will be releasing the fourth installment of the National Biodiversity Assessment later this year.
I think it's very, very, very important, especially this year with the theme that talks about harmony with nature and also sustainable development. So the work that we do as SANBI, South African National Biodiversity Institute, we bridge the gap between science, policy and practice. So we provide data, we provide information, we monitor what is happening. So the National Biodiversity Assessment as a tool is a tool to check and monitor the threat status to biodiversity, but also the protection level. How much protection are we according? We do that. We're going to do the fourth installment now. We're just about to finalize. I think it's going to be ready by the end of this year.
The International Day for Biological Diversity, which is observed annually on May the 22nd, marks the adoption of the Convention on Biological Diversity in 1992, serving to raise awareness about the essential role biodiversity plays in ecosystems and highlight the urgent need to halt biodiversity loss. For Channel Africa News, I am Tutongobeni in Johannesburg.
And Tutongobeni brings us to 31 minutes past 6 Central African time. That means news headlines with Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Tanzania has released a Kenyan activist who had been arrested after he tried to attend a hearing in the treason case against a detained opposition leader in Dar es Salaam. Boniface Mwangi had attempted to observe opposition leader Tundu Lissu's first court appearance on Monday. South Africa's presidency has clarified why the special envoy Mcebisi Jonas was not part of the president's delegation to the U.S. Questions have risen on whether he did not travel because of his views of the President of the United States, which have been critical. And Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has accused some of his country's closest allies of siding with rapists and baby killers after they criticized Israel's conduct in Gaza. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Our first full sports bulletin on Rise and Shine on this Friday is by Musibudi Makura. Let's find out what's happening.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Very good morning from the Sports Desk. So the Confederation of African Football on Thursday unveiled the new Total Energies CAF Champions League trophy together with their partners, Total Energies, marking a bold new chapter in the legacy of Africa's premier club competitions. So the unveiling took place in Johannesburg at the headquarters of the Total Energies and was also attended by some of African football legends, including Lucas Radebe, Teko Modise, as well as Simpiwe Shabalala, as well as several other African football leaders. Now, one of the two finalists, Mamelodi Sundowns, as well as Pyramids FC, will make history when they lift the new trophy. Now, CAF's official unveiling of the striking new trophy design is far more than just a mere replacement. It also represents a powerful evolution of CAF's commitment to modernization as well as innovation as part of the CAF's broader strategy to rebrand as well as elevate its competitions. The new design was conceived to amplify the visual impact of African football's most coveted prize. So the first leg of the CAF Champions League final will take place this coming weekend. That's tomorrow, actually, the 24th of May, where Mamelodi Sundowns will be hosting Pyramids FC in the first leg, while the second leg will be played on the 1st of June in Cairo, Egypt. Further afield now, Real Madrid captain Luka Modric will leave the Spanish Giants after the end of the club FIFA World Cup campaign. The 39-year-old Croatian midfielder, the 2018 Ballon d'Or winner, will play his final match at the Real Santiago Bernabeu home when they welcome Real Sociedad on Saturday in their final La Liga game of the season. The Croatian has won 28 trophies, including 6 Champions League trophies, as well as 4 domestic titles since joining Real from Spurs in the year 2012. Modric also bagged 2 goals as well as 6 assists in 34 appearances in the Spanish top flight this season, as Real were also pipped to the title by Barcelona. He also featured in every game as Carlo Ancelotti's side reached the quarterfinals of the UEFA Champions League, where they were beaten 5-1 on aggregate by Arsenal. Real will open the FIFA Club World Cup campaign against Saudi Arabia's Al Hilal on the 18th of June and then face off with Mexico's Puchica and then RB Salzburg of Austria in the group stages of the competition. On to some rugby news now. The draw for the pool stages of the 2027 Men's Rugby World Cup is set to take place in December, with World Rugby having confirmed the news yesterday. The tournament, which will be staged in Australia from the 1st of October right until the 13th of November, will be expanded to take in 24 teams rather than 20, as it was the case since the 1999 World Cup. The teams will be divided into 6 pools of 4 teams. 16 teams have qualified so far, including 2-time defending champions South Africa, France also in the mix, New Zealand, Italy, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, Fiji, Australia, England, Argentina, Romania, Portugal, Spain, Georgia, as well as Japan. Meanwhile, the final tournament will be held in Dubai. The final qualifying tournament will be held in Dubai from the 8th to the 18th of November. On to swimming news now. Swimming South Africa is preparing for life after 2 of the country's most decorated athletes in Olympic Games history, Tatiana Smith as well as Chad le Clos. Smith retired after last year's Paris Olympic Games, while le Clos is in the twilight of his career. The planning for the 2028 Olympic Games in Los Angeles as well as the 2032 Games in Australia has already started, but in 2028 there will be no Tatiana Smith, and the possibility even of Chad le Clos representing the country in the Los Angeles Games is quite slim. Swimming South Africa President Alan Fritz says preparations are already underway to prepare for the next Olympic Games.
In terms of milestones to LA, we actually work in an 8-year cycle, so we're also working on Australia at the moment in terms of the Olympics in 2032. So for us, certainly the World Championships is a massive milestone in terms of our preparation. Our athletes will come back, they will have short course in South Africa. We will then go more or less into our swimming season again, which is provincial championships and then our junior national championships and then again seniors. By seniors we would have a very good view where we are in terms of preparing for LA.
Now, South Africa amassed 6 medals in Paris, with about 2 coming from swimming, courtesy of the retired Smith. Now, Fritz is also hopeful there will go 1 medal in LA coming from Paris, finalist in the men's 100-meter breaststroke, Peter Kotsia.
Realistically, for LA, I don't think we can bet more than 1 medal at this point in time. But as our preparation goes over the next year and a half, things may change. But I rate that Peter should medal at 2028. I'm putting a bit of pressure on him, but it's okay.
And that's a wrap from the Sports Desk at this hour. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za and call us on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Got something to say? Are you passionate about issues that matter? Do you have a voice that deserves to be heard? Well, we've got the perfect platform for you. Call in or drop us a WhatsApp on +27 63 406 9126, and we will call you back so you could have your say and be part of the conversation.
30 years of age. I just turned 30 on the 15th of November. So that's who I am,
It's not just talk, it's your chance to air your views, share your opinion, engage with the community that values your perspective. Follow us on our social media. Visit our website at www.channelafrica.co.za and get ready to share your views on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Time for our economics news. South Africa's Parliament's Finance Committee responds to developments on the fuel levy. Well, let's find out from Buntle Headpush, because she's got the details as she brings us our first update.
Business news on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Thanks, Asanda, and a very good morning to our listeners. South Africa's Parliament's Standing Committee on Finance has cautioned some political parties against frustrating government's plans to generate revenue. Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana announced an increase in the fuel levy during his budget speech before the National Assembly in Cape Town on Wednesday. Some political parties have rejected the increase. The committee's chairperson, Joe Maswanganyi, says some political parties are promoting populist agendas, including opposing government's tax policy.
We should not promote a situation where we don't want the public and the corporates to pay taxes. It will not be right that every time the state talks about increasing a tax, we encourage protest. You are not going to run a state based on populism, because there's no state that can function without revenue. Otherwise, if you want to run the government and the state in general based on populism, that you will never raise a tax and you never do this, at some state that state is going to collapse.
Credit rating expert Torsten Hinrichs says regulators and politicians can play an important role by encouraging the culture of rating of institutions to unlock funding opportunities in Africa. This emerged on the second day of the Africa Annual Credit Ratings Conference in Cape Town, South Africa. Experts have outlined some of the prerequisites to unlocking domestic bond markets through credit ratings. The meeting concluded yesterday with a focus on shaping the future of credit ratings on the continent. Hinrich says more can be done to create a ratings culture in Africa.
To, for example, create a pan-African regulator for the ratings industry, just like the Europeans have done some years ago, some 10, 15 years ago, with an institution called ESMA, and that's a European-wide regulator for the ratings industry, creating a level playing field across Europe for the industry. I think that would go a long way also in creating this credit and ratings culture in Africa.
Egypt's central bank has cut its key interest rates by 100 basis points. The bank says the cut signals a shift towards monetary easing as inflationary pressures ease and Egypt's economic recovery continues. The Monetary Policy Committee cut the overnight depo rate to 24% and the lending rate to 25%. This is its second decrease this year after having left rates unchanged for a year. Women in Philanthropy South Africa, together with Investec Bank, hosted Women in Business yesterday at a gathering in Johannesburg. The discussion centered around, among other challenges, how to build resilience and foster lasting impact in different economic environments. The platform provided all women philanthropists the opportunity to share their lived experiences. Steering committee member at Women in Philanthropy South Africa, Sinenhlanhla Nene.
My vision of a goodie bag is, when people can actually leave feeling, re-energized, because sometimes social impact work is draining. To meet other women who are sharing experiences, who, especially in a climate where things are changing. I mean, 1 minute an organization has funding, the next minute Donald Trump wakes up and he decides that there's no funding anymore. What do you do in a situation like that? It helps build resilient organizations as well to change with the times.
Japan's new agriculture minister Shinjiro Koizumi has pledged immediate rice relief for consumers to prevent a shift to foreign brands. Koizumi said he would quickly move rice from government stockpiles to store shelves where they would be offered at prices significantly lower than current levels. Soaring rice prices, due in part to crop damage from extreme heat and additional demand from a boom in tourism, have become a major concern for Japanese consumers as well as the government. The government has been releasing some of its stockpiled rice since March, but that has yet to translate to lower supermarket prices. Taking a look at our indicators this morning, $1 in Nigeria is trading at 159 naira 35. In Botswana, it's at 13 pula 32. Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 37. And in Zambia, it's at 27 kwacha 19. Taking a look at the BRICS countries now, $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 real 65. Russia, 79 rubles 65. India, it's at 85 rupees 87, China 7 yuan 20, and South Africa $1 is trading at 17 rand 98 cents. $1 is trading at 74 pence to the British pound and 88 to the euro. Looking at the commodities, this morning gold is trading at $3,297 and platinum at $1,087 per ounce, while the price of Brent crude oil is at $64.08 a barrel. Those are your business news at this hour. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Bontle Hetbush.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine, weekdays 6 till 9 Central African Time on Channel Africa.
G20 fact for this Friday. South Africa's G20 presidency will advance 3 high-level priorities which will find expression in the work of the Sherpa and finance tracks. The first of these priorities is inclusive economic growth, industrialization, employment and inequality. The second priority is food security. The third priority is artificial intelligence or AI and innovation for sustainable development. And that's our G20 fact for this Friday.
G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa, championing Africa through solidarity, equality and sustainability.
Former South African President Thabo Mbeki says the historic importance of the Solomon Mahlangu campus in Morogoro, Tanzania, is significant for the continent and should be documented. He was speaking ahead of a wreath-laying and tree-planting ceremony at the campus's Sokoine University of Agriculture. The campus was crucial in the fight for better education for African National Congress, or ANC, exiles who were forced to South Africa during the apartheid regime. Klandla Mahlangu reports.
The Solomon Mahlangu Freedom College, SOMAFCO, now known as the Solomon Mahlangu Campus, was established in 1978 and named after anti-apartheid activist Solomon Mahlangu, who was executed by the apartheid regime in 1979 at the age of 22, a year before exiled ANC members arrived in Tanzania. The Mazimbu Graves is where some of ANC freedom fighters and their families are buried, and the ANC Holland Solidarity Hospital, amongst others, are all located around the campus. Speaking ahead of the wreath-laying and tree-planting ceremony, former South African President Thabo Mbeki said there's a need to document the history about the campus.
We had a discussion with the regional commissioner not long ago, and one of the decisions we've taken is that we need to do something about producing a documentary of what he has just spoken about. Because what he has said, except in the SADC books, you don't have an audio-visual story. This one that is talking. So that even somebody down there can actually hear and see this place, including all of its elements that we are talking about. So we decided, the provincial commissioner arranged this thing in a very nice way. But he was giving us an instruction, which we accepted. So we'll be coming back, Chancellor, a proper team, cameras and all of that, to tell this audio-visual story of SOMAFCO and then Sokoine University. Yes. Because these two institutions they are like this. So it becomes then available to a much wider audience. The historic importance of this place to the total liberation of the continent is very important. It's a very important part of not just Tanzanian and South African history, but of the history of the continent.
Today, the Solomon Mahlangu campus is one of the two campuses that comprise Sokoine University of Agriculture, one of Tanzania's leading universities. The image of the ANC flag is the highlight of all historical sites found at the college. Associate Professor and Head of Department of Biological Sciences at the Sokoine University of Agriculture, Alin Masaila, said the campus was strategically chosen as a base for exiled ANC members.
It is a lowland. When you are in town, it was very difficult to know what is happening in this area. And now they were moved from the military camp to here at this area. Now, away from home, with pretty much little to do, the senior youth sat in group with the junior one, and they were seemingly teaching the junior one the common subjects they used to study at school in South Africa. And when this information was brought to the then President Oliver Tambo, it was so touching to him. And of course they decided that in this land, a school be built.
The ceremony was hosted ahead of the Thabo Mbeki Africa Day lecture scheduled to take place in Dar es Salaam on Saturday. Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Klandla Mahlangu in Morogoro, Tanzania.
So later on the show here on Africa Rise and Shine, we cross to Peter, our colleague over there in Tanzania, for the commemoration. He'll be bringing us more information in terms of what's transpiring there. Of course, the official lecture, the Thabo Mbeki Africa Day lecture, happening tomorrow, that is Saturday. Political expediency in South Africa has driven the passing of amendments to the Political Party Funding Act by Parliament earlier this week. This is according to NGO My Vote Counts, which has slammed the move to double the upper limit of donations to political parties from 15 million to 30 million rand, and the threshold for disclosure from 100 to 200,000 rand. MVC says Parliament passed the legislation despite a pending judgment it has brought, which seeks to ensure that every cent donated is declared. Busibo Bela reports.
My Vote Counts has taken a dim view.
of Parliament passing amendments which allow political parties to receive twice as much in donations, 30 million to the previous 15 million rand. The amendments also permit parties to declare a minimum of 200,000 rand to the previous 100,000. The NGO is at the forefront of a court bid to ensure that independent candidates and political parties alike disclose all donations they receive down to the last cent. MVC's Joel Brechman says the rush to pass the amendments, even as a full bench of the Western Cape High Court considers the matter, speaks to what is driving political parties.
We see this as politically expedient. We see this as political parties favoring secrecy, favoring their own interests and those of their donors over transparency and accountability. We understand that politics is expensive, right? Parties need money to operate and to fulfill their roles in a constitutional democracy. But there has to be a balance between the rights of people to know who funds parties and to limit the influence of private actors in our politics. And it seems to us that there was no urgency to do this.
The amendments have been passed based on a report drafted by the Home Affairs Portfolio Committee. However, it is not all represented political parties that have assented to the amendments in the parliamentary vote earlier this week. Notable in opposition to them were the ATM, Build One South Africa and Action SA. Their concern relates to the amendments doing little to promote transparency and prevent the financial capture of the country's politics. Brechman says Parliament's latest move is inexplicable.
The whole process is irrational. The Parliamentary Budget Office, when it was asked to do research on this process, found that the original limits, there's no justification for them. There's no rational reason as to why those were the original limits. And now what the Portfolio Committee on Home Affairs has done, and now what the National Assembly is also complicit in doing, is perpetuating this irrational approach to our political funding limits.
Compliance with the provisions of the Political Party Funding Act has long been a concern amongst parties themselves. Some have pointed at the discrepancy between donations declared and lavish spending on election campaigns by some parties, culminating in calls for a review of the legislation. But the latest amendments may not be what some envisaged as the solution. Home Affairs Portfolio Committee Chair Musa Chabane explains what happens next.
Now that the Parliament has passed this draft resolution, it's submitted to the President for him to then consider his process and the team in terms of whether the amounts that have been carried by Parliament are sufficient for political party. But I think he will look on various aspects in terms of the Electoral Amendment Act of 2024, in terms of the cost of running political affairs and independent activities. As you know that now that the Act requires individual to participate as individual. Two, it also look on the inflation. I think we're fully aware that we're pressed on the fiscal. So these are among the issues that the President may need to consider. You must also know that the state is unable to fully fund political parties. And that is the reason that inform political parties to source funds from various spectrum.
There are mounting calls for the IEC's political party funding unit to be given more powers to police irregularities pertaining to declarations from political parties. This will form part of the Electoral Management Body's symposium to discuss the country's political party funding dispensation next month. IEC Manager for Political Funding, George Mahlangu.
I hope that this deliberation that is going to take place in June will begin to look at these things, whether do you want the transgressions to be dealt with by the EMB? Because these are two conflicting mandates, right? Because when you go for a political party that transgress the law, or you don't go for it, you are going to be criticized that you are in favor of this political party against the other. I think and hope that these deliberations will begin to look at the two, that is the commission or is the EMB the right institution to implement political funding?
That was IEC Manager for Political Funding, George Mahlangu, ending that report by Busi Bopela.
Zilipendwa na Abedi Jean de la Croix. Uzuri na ukubwa wa kazi yako unatokana na nini?
Kwanza kabisa ni kujifunza vitu mbalimbali, lakini pia kuvaa uhalisia wa jamii kile inachopitia, kujifunza vitu vipya, lakini pia kufanya mazoezi na kumshirikisha Mungu katika career yangu ya muziki.
Bila shaka. Je, management na wadhamini vile vile wana nafasi kubwa au wana nafasi gani katika mafanikio yako kikazi?
Niseme labda wana 99% katika mafanikio ya muziki wangu, management au mabosi wangu.
Umewahi pia kupokea salamu za pongezi au ukosoaji kuhusiana na muziki wako?
Nilishapokea nyingi sana kutoka sehemu mbalimbali, DRC, Tanzania na East Africa nzima kwa jumla.
Tuzungumzie kuhusu ukosoaji sasa. Unajisikia pale unapokosolewa?
Najisikia vizuri sana. Unajua usipokosolewa ina maana wewe sio binadamu wa kawaida, kwa sababu asiyekosolewa pekee ni Mungu.
Zilipendwa kila Jumamosi kuanzia saa 12 kamili majira ya Afrika ya Kati hadi saa 1 kamili majira ya Afrika ya Kati.
The Midnight Snack, 12 to 3 a.m.
Interracial relationships. And now you are based in the States and you are married to a beautiful white woman, white lady.
I learned that, for us in our culture, we literally can speak our mind. I remember when we had started dating and whatnot, and, she picked up like a little bit of weight. And me, I was like, oh, wow, you must be happy in this relationship because look at you. You look great. You're even picking up some weight. And she got really, really offended. And it took I think it was about a couple of hours before I could realize that, because I could tell that she was off after that. And it took me a while to figure out what it was. Until later when I was talking to her, I'm like, you're really, really off today. And then she expressed that, yeah, because you're telling me that I'm picking on some weight. And I'm like, in my culture, when you are gaining some weight, it means you're happy.
Yes.
So that's what I was trying to imply.
The Midnight Snack, every Monday, 12 to 3 a.m. with Chanduko Ligege.
All right, it's time to enter the second hour of Africa Rise and Shine. It's 7 o'clock Central African Time. A very good morning to you. If you've just joined us, I am Asanda Beda, and thank you for doing just that. Whether you are on DSTV 802, our channel, on OpenView 628, our other place you can see us or hear us, or www.Channel Africa, or whether you are live streaming with us, we welcome you. And of course, we're coming to you from our Johannesburg studios in South Africa live on this Friday, the 23rd of May. Lots to come up in this hour. We'll be zooming into Tanzania, and they've released a Kenyan activist who had been arrested after he tried to attend a hearing in the treason case against a detained opposition leader in Dar es Salaam. Of course, we had spoken to a previous Kenyan activist, former Justice Minister, who also endured the same fate. So now that's the developing story. We'll be speaking to Tanzania correspondent Gabriel Zakaria, finding out why this particular Boniface Mwangi was detained and also barred from attending those court proceedings. All of that and more coming up on the second hour of Africa Rise and Shine. Let's start with our news update. Here's Onele Nzinzi, and then followed by Musibudi Makura with sports headlines.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Tanzania has released a Kenyan activist who had been arrested after he tried to attend a hearing in the treason case against a detained opposition leader in Dar es Salaam. The Kenya National Commission of Human Rights said it had received Boniface Mwangi in Kenya's southeastern Kwale County yesterday afternoon. Kenya's Foreign Minister Musalia Mudavadi also confirmed Mwangi's release. Tabiso Lohoko reports.
Rights activist Hussein Khalid has tweeted that Boniface Mwangi has been severely tortured by Tanzanian security agents and could barely walk. Mwangi had attempted to observe opposition leader Tundu Lissu's first court appearance on Monday in a case that has spotlighted a growing crackdown on opponents of President Samia Suluhu Hassan. He was arrested on allegations of providing false information to gain entry into the country. Lissu, who was shot 16 times in a 2017 attack and came second in Tanzania's last presidential poll, was charged with the treason.
The African National Congress Secretary General Fikile Mbalula says evidence presented by US President Donald Trump on Wednesday to support his claim of a white genocide in South Africa shows that he is misinformed. Trump played a video of the Economic Freedom Fighters leader Julius Malema singing the Kill the Boer chant to support his claims of a genocide. President Ramaphosa rejected the claims, emphasizing that the inflammatory rhetoric from certain groups does not reflect the government's policies. Balula says it's absurd for Trump to confuse crime with genocide.
What is basing his falsification on? First, it was unsubstantiated. Those clips about the leader of the opposition and 5-year memory of white Afrikaners or farmers marching alongside the road and the widths on the side, saying that this signifies the death of white farmers. That showed that the President of the United States was out of depth. He should have brought something to the fore.
South Africa's presidency has meanwhile clarified why the special envoy Mcebisi Jonas was not part of the president's delegation to the US. The presidency says he was left out at his own request, but he contributed to the preparedness engagements ahead of the meeting. The presidency has also added that Jonas has valid travel documents to the US. Questions have risen on whether he did not travel because of his views on the President of the United States, which have been critical. A delegation from the United Kingdom visiting South Africa's parliament says they will try to find out why leader of the Economic Freedom Fighters Julius Malema's visa application was delayed when he was to travel to Britain 2 weeks ago. The delegation met with MPs on Parliament's defence portfolio and international relations committees. The group made up of MPs from both members of the Conservative and Labour parties met with their South African counterparts to engage on various international alliances and defence partnerships. The EFF's Carl Niasen asked the delegation about the recent incident. Malema was scheduled to address the Africa Together conference at Cambridge University. One of the UK delegates, Seed Kamal, a member of the House of Lords, says they are aware of the matter.
It's been raised with us. We are different parties, we're not suitable for the government, and that's not an excuse, that's just a fact. And what we will do, we will raise it to that British Consul tonight to find out the fact. From what I know, and this is not official, I do not think there is any policy to exclude some of the EFF. I suspect, frankly, maybe I shouldn't say this is on camera, but we know what bureaucracies are like, and sometimes, frankly, it could well have been a result of bureaucracy. But we will take that back.
And lastly, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has accused some of his country's closest allies of siding with rapists and baby killers after they criticized Israel's conduct in Gaza. On Monday, Britain, France and Canada condemned the expanded Israeli military operation and the denial of humanitarian aid to civilians in the territory. Netanyahu said the leaders of the three countries had brought into Hamas propaganda.
I say to President Macron, Prime Minister Carney, and Prime Minister Starmer, when mass murderers, rapists, baby killers, and kidnappers thank you, you're on the wrong side of justice. You're on the wrong side of humanity. And you're on the wrong side of history.
Channel Africa News, I am Onele Nsinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news this hour, Novak Djokovic into the Geneva Open semi-finals, and Luka Modric is set to leave Real Madrid after the FIFA Club World Cup this year. I'll have details of these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 Central African Time on Channel Africa.
Tanzania has released a Kenyan activist who had been arrested after he tried to attend a hearing in the treason case against a detained opposition leader in Dar es Salaam, Kenyan authorities said on Thursday. The Kenya National Commission on Human Rights said it had received Boniface Mwangi in Kenya's southeastern Kwale County on Thursday afternoon. Kenya's Foreign Minister Musalia Mudavadi also confirmed Mwangi's release. For more on this, we joined on the line by our Tanzanian correspondent Gabriel Zakaria. Gabriel, good morning to you. How are you on this Friday?
Yes, I'm very well. All is going good. Good morning.
All right. So what do we know about who Boniface Mwangi? We know he's a Kenyan activist, but who is he? What else do we know?
So far, we don't know much about him. As you introduced that, we know him as an activist from Kenya who arrived in Tanzania last week, allegedly to attend to the court of the opposition leader who is detained now, Tundu Lissu, but no further information we know about him because there is no any information that has been officially issued by the government about whether he was really under the arrest of the government, whether he was under custody or where was he. There is no any official information that has been released so far. But last evening is when we learned out that Boniface Mwangi was released. He was deported back to his country. But this is according to the newspapers. One of the big newspapers in Tanzania, the Citizen newspaper, has just informed about all this. But there is no any information from the authority to clarify or to say that whether he was being detained by the authority, by the government, or what.
He was in Tanzania this week to attend the trial of opposition leader Tundu Lissu. Was he part of the contingent of counsels that were joined by Kenya's former Justice Minister Martha Karua?
Yes. He is being allegedly that he was among the members who came together with Martha Karua, but with him who was successively entered in the country. He was entered in the country. He was in his hotel, according to the information that is being released by the newspapers, by other outlets, that he was being arrested from his hotel, from his room hotel. So far, as I said earlier, that there is no any clear information that is being released by the authority to prove whether he was really under the arrest of the authority, or it is just allegedly that. So far, there is no any authority that has proven that the guy, the activist was under the arrest of Tanzania.
Does he have any special connection to the Chadema party besides just wanting to be in solidarity with democracy within the East Africa region and the solidarity that I guess is part of Martha's contingent they're all calling for as activists?
Yes, of course. This has been it has been there since the stopping of Martha Karua together with her troop just to come to go to attend the case or the trial of the opposition leader. Then later on, the Chadema authority or the Chadema top leaders have released the information. The information that they are blaming about what has the government done, what has been done, and they were translating it as in democracy, that what is happening is just to infringe the democracy and to restrict the citizen of the East African to go from one country to another, something that they claim and they say that it's something that is not acceptable, and it has also to be taken action by the international communities, because what has been happening is something that they translate as to infringe the democracy in the country where the democracy is existing according to the constitution of the land.
Advocacy groups are saying that Mwangi was tortured during his detention. What do we know about how he was treated?
So far, we know nothing about that because there is no any information exactly that has been released here. And when you even try to check on the newspapers of the day today, you cannot see any story at the front pages about the release of the activist and whether the activist was tortured and where was he held. There is no any information that is exactly being released here, whether from the authority or from the media outlet. So far, there is no there. Instead, you can only find from the social media where the social media members are just complaining about this, and they're alleging that the activist was tortured in Tanzania. But so far, there is no anyone who can clarify this information.
On the side of Kenya's government, what role did they play in making sure that he gets home safely? What is their response to this incident?
Well, according to the newspapers, we are seeing that the spokesperson from the Ministry of External Affairs or the Foreign Affairs of Kenya has confirmed that they received the activist who entered into her country through the coast zone of his country, not through Nairobi border, but it was through the coast of Mombasa. Then he entered into the city of Nairobi. This is according to the newspapers that have released this story, especially the Citizen newspapers and the East African newspapers. This is what they have written, but so far there is no information that has been cleared the air that how did he entered in his country and whether he was under the escort of the country of Tanzanian as a country, or whether he was under the escort of his embassy. There is no so far any information on ground that how did he go back to his country, whether he was accompanied by his embassy, whether the government of Tanzania. There is no so far any clear information.
There's also Ugandan activist who was detained alongside Mwangi, Agatha Utuhaire. Has there been any update on him?
No, so far there is no any update information about him, whether he was detained together with the activist or he was released earlier. So far there is no any information spreading or that is explaining more about this. And even the activist Boniface Mwangi has not said anything. We haven't heard anything through the media outlets saying whether he was detained together with the Ugandan activist as well, and where is he now. Where is he about? So far, there is no any information we are receiving or we are getting from any either party that where is he, whether he was really detained together with him and whether he was released or is still in detention. So far, there is no any clear information about this.
All right. Well, we'll leave it there for today. Thank you so much, Gabriel.
Thank you for your time.
Very interesting times indeed, when no one wants to talk and we need answers. The Tanzanian government is not speaking. The media is not reporting on anything. This will be a story that we follow, I guess, for the next few days coming. That's our Tanzanian correspondent, Gabriel Zakaria.
Você é fluente em português? É apaixonado por rádio e quer trabalhar na África do Sul? Você tem documentos que o qualificam para trabalhar na África do Sul? Nesse caso, podemos ter uma oportunidade para você trabalhar no Canal África. Envie seu currículo e demonstração para Canal África @ newsroom@channelafrica.co.za. Lembre-se, se você não receber alguma resposta nossa em 14 dias, isso significa que você não foi selecionado. Canal África, a perspectiva africana.
Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
16 minutes past 6 Central African time. We continue with the story, and now we're joined by Hussein Khalid, human rights activist, social justice campaigner, lawyer, executive director for Vocal Africa. That's a non-governmental organization championing human rights across the continent. Thank you for joining us, Hussein. How are you this Friday?
All right, Asanda. But of course, very disturbed.
Yes.
Very shaken. What is happening within the region and Africa in general.
So let's start in terms of your reaction here. So you just shared some of it now, but when it comes to all these events and as they are unfolding and also, I think, exacerbating the issues, we've got questions but no answers. The Tanzanian government is not saying anything. The media are not reporting, as you heard from our correspondent, Gabriel, when we spoke to him earlier. Let's talk about your thoughts on the Tanzanian authorities and how they're handling these issues.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, quite disappointing that, we have a government that is particularly led by an African woman, and something that we celebrated very much, giving women opportunities finally as Africans so that they can lead and they can, show the way. But to now discover that, it's more or less an authoritarianism regime involved in mass killings of its own people, and now even subjecting foreign nationals to horrendous torture is something that is extremely surprising. We've just received information from reliable sources that Agatha has also been dumped last night, but for safety reasons, of course, we can't divulge more information until we are 100% sure of her safety. But what our colleagues have gone through is just unimaginable. And for this also to be done in the name of the president is very, very disappointing.
There are reports that the Kenyan government intervened and demanded that these detainees, from their side at least, be released. What do you know about that?
Yeah, so we were at, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Nairobi, our Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and we camped there until late the night before Boniface Mwangi was released, and we wanted to know what action they had taken. Before going there, they were also just, surprisingly, also just watching the news and following up through the news. And we told them, you can't just do that. You're the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, your national is being held by a foreign country. You must do something. So we sat there until they were able to write a letter, a demand letter, and they shared that with their counterparts in Tanzania, and we had to take action for them to take action. So we also were very surprised by their comments that they have very cordial diplomatic ties with Tanzania. They don't want to ruin that, so they are following the matter up quietly, diplomatically. But we had to push our Ministry of Foreign Affairs for them to take action.
Well, it's one thing to want to do things quietly, but we live in an era of social media, and we saw clips from that court appearance of opposition leader Tundu Lissu showing in terms of court proceedings what was transpiring. If we go back to the case of Kenyan activist and former Justice Minister Martha Karua, the reasons that she was given for her detainment and her refused entry into court was that there were security concerns. But from those clips on social media, we saw a heavy police presence. So clearly it seems, as one would read into it, that there is capacity for law enforcement and security implementations. How do you read into that?
Yeah, I'm among those who were detained at the airport and then deported back to Kenya, together with the former Chief Justice Willy Mutunga and another activist, Hanifa Aden. This is the day after Martha Karua and two of her colleagues were also detained and deported back to Kenya. As I said, security reasons was just an excuse they gave, but when we asked, and up to this point in time, when Boniface was dropped at the border of Kenya and Tanzania, no clear reasons were given. When we were detained at the airport, we asked them, could you please clarify the mistake we committed? Maybe there's certain documentation we have not provided. Maybe there's a certain Tanzanian law that we have broken that has caused us to be detained here. But up to the point of deportation, there was absolutely no information. There was no reason given for the detainment, and we were just put back on the plane and told to go back to our country. So clearly, we know that 4, 5, 6 extra people in that country is not something that they cannot handle. Their selection, their allowing people in selectively. We do have one or two other activists who are allowed in, one or two, like the former Chief Justice was also allowed in. So clearly they were in communication with our government, probably, that then they were, sharing information on who to allow in or not to allow in.
Kenya has its own elections coming up in 2027. In terms of all this activism and solidarity for East Africa freedom, can we read anything into what campaigning will be like for those build up to those elections in Kenya, with these Kenyan activists being so vocal about democracy in East Africa?
Yes, so our elections follow each other year after year. We have elections in Tanzania this year, we have elections in Uganda next year, and Kenya the year after. So we know that our governments share intelligence with each other. In terms of the people, we have an East African cooperation where there's supposed to be free movement of persons and goods. We have formed an East African community network where we try to share as civil society, as human rights defenders, the kind of work that we do. Our going to Tanzania was informed also by some of our colleagues, some of our partners, who intimated that, we need to be very vigilant. We need to observe these court cases so that we ensure justice is delivered. And going there was merely just to show that solidarity. We are not supporting any side of the political divide, but we just wanted to ensure that, justice is done. Yeah. I by no means want to interfere with the court process, but observance of court matters is something that's done across the world. Courts of justice are open places where anyone and everyone, even international observers, are allowed to come in. So this was very, very surprising that we were detained, and then some of our colleagues were taken in, they were tortured. It's absolutely unacceptable.
We'll leave it there for now, Hussein, and thanks again for your time on this Friday.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hussein Khalid is human rights activist, social justice campaigner, lawyer, executive director for Vocal Africa. That's a non-governmental organization championing for human rights across the continent.
What does Africa's future look like? And are we bold enough to shape it? Okay. Join Channel Africa and the Thabo Mbeki Foundation for the 15th Africa Day Lecture. Live from the iconic Julius Nyerere International Convention Center in Dar es Salaam on Saturday, 24th of May from 3 to 6 p.m. Central African Time. This year's theme, the state of the continent and reigniting the African Renaissance. Expect bold ideas, visionary leaders, and the spark to reignite Africa's future. Be part of the conversation only on Channel Africa, the African perspective. Find us on SABC Plus and on www.channelafrica.co.za. Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
It's 25 minutes past 7 on Africa Rise and Shine. We are still to come are the news headlines with Onel Nzinzi. We'll also have our economics as well as sports updates. And also later on in the show, we've got our Friday markets. That's our regular feature on this day, looking at what's happening in the world of economics, more detailed with an analyst on that one. Now, Corruption Watch has filed a complaint with South Africa's public protector over the failure of the Farm Worker Equity Schemes, or FWES. The anti-corruption body says the government initiative meant to empower farm workers through shared ownership in farms has failed due to corruption and mismanagement. Melusi Ngala, senior researcher and project lead at Corruption Watch, says officials and private interests hijacked the scheme, leaving workers without the promised benefits. The complaint is backed by the Surplus People Project and the Legal Resources Center, who've long advocated for farm workers' rights. Ngala joins us now on the line to further discuss this. Melusi, thank you for joining us. How are you on this Friday?
Good morning, and thank you for having us this morning.
Our pleasure. It's been 30 years since the farm worker equity schemes were introduced. It was meant to empower farm workers through shared ownership in farms. But give us more background in terms of the scheme.
Yeah, so following the introduction of the democratic dispensation, what the government was faced with was the land question of how do they redress the wrongs of the past. And one of the ways that was proposed back then was to say perhaps is for farm workers as one of the marginalized groupings to be incorporated into farming businesses. And what then the government decided was to introduce a policy by which it would encourage commercial farmers to come forward and say they've got an X amount of farm workers and they have all decided to go into a business. And what government then would do for each farmer, based on calculations and what the business model it is that they were planning to do, they would then give the commercial partner on behalf of the farm workers money. And in some instances, you need to recall that some of these commercial partners had hundreds of farm workers. So this is a matter that affects ultimately thousands, if not tens of thousands of people. And then the government would issue these funds and hope then for the best that, you know what, farm workers would be treated as shareholders in these businesses. In some instances, it's believed that it worked out in some ways, but generally there were many problems, and these problems has been experienced for decades.
So as Corruption Watch, you now filed a complaint against those problems that are there, and you've said that the scheme has failed due to corruption and mismanagement. How do you see the role of the public protector in addressing this, and what are you hoping the outcomes will be?
Well, as we know that accountability is a huge problem in as far as the government is concerned. The government, or at least the department in this instance, had issued a consultancy firm to look into farm worker equity schemes as a policy to see what's actually going on. And a damning report came out, which they then shelved afterwards and did not act upon. And in this report, it highlights some of these issues, that some people are not getting their dividends and so on and so forth. And at this point in time, that's when grassroots organizations stepped in and tried to assist farm workers because no one actually cared. And we then also did our own research into the matter, produced a podcast looking into it, and we had to then engage with the department, try to see if any of these matters could be resolved and why this report was not dealt with. But the department was not forthcoming, and nothing was really done, and hence we are now pleading with the Public Protector's Office to actually hold the department and its officials accountable.
All right. Well, we'll leave it there for today, and all the best with your endeavors. Farm workers are a very important part of our economy, not just that, but as we try and tackle food security in our country and on our continent, we need to champion for that group of people. So thanks for joining us, Melusi.
Thank you very much.
Melusi Ngala is Senior Researcher and Project Lead at Corruption Watch, talking to us on the line. 7:30 Central African Time. It is time for news headlines. Good morning, Onele.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Nigeria's ruling All Progressive Congress Party has endorsed President Bola Tinubu to run for a second and final term at the next elections due in early 2027. The APC at the summit in the country's capital, Abuja, said it wanted Tinubu to continue with reforms that the government says has rebooted the economy. Senators in the Democratic Republic of Congo have approved a government request that former President Joseph Kabila be stripped of his parliamentary immunity and charged with treason. And the African National Congress Secretary General Fikile Mbalula says evidence presented by U.S. President Donald Trump on Wednesday to support his claim of white genocide in South Africa showed that he is misinformed. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Tsinzi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Let's get the latest from the world of sports now. Here's Musibudi Makura with your details.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning once again from the sports desk. Now, CAF's head of television as well as communications, Luxolo September, has revealed that the recruitment of veteran South African administrator Derek Blackensee is part of the continuing to grow the federation. This was revealed at the unveiling of the new CAF Champions League trophy in Johannesburg yesterday ahead of the first leg of the final between Mamelodi Sundowns as well as Pyramids FC on Saturday at Loftus Versfeld Stadium in South Africa's capital city, Pretoria. September previously worked with Blackensee at the Premier Soccer League before heading to CAF. He says the appointment is part of enhancing African football.
We've just hired a South African, Derek Blackensee, to head our professional club football, because we are really serious about this part. We're looking at how we can give it a strong, not only in sentiments, but also ensuring that we are listening across the board to what people are saying. Just the design of the trophy alone took forever for people to decide and discuss about it. Obviously, there's a big discussion about how should interclub football look like in Africa. There is an African Football League. There is a Total Energies CAF Champions League. There is a Total Energies CAF Confederations Cup. How do we look at these products and how do we ensure that each of them has an identity?
Right, we'll stay with CAF News. The Confederation of African Football on Thursday officially unveiling that new Total Energies CAF Champions League trophy together with their partners Total Energies, marking, of course, a bold new chapter in the legacy of Africa's premier club competition. The unveiling took place at the headquarters of the Total Energies company in Johannesburg and was attended by some of African football legends, including Lucas Radebe, Teko Modise, as well as Piwe Shabalala, as well as several other African football leaders. One of the two finalists, Mamelodi Sundowns or Pyramids FC, will make history when they lift the new trophy. Now, CAF's official unveiling of a striking new trophy design is far more than just a mere replacement. It also represents a powerful evolution of CAF's commitment to modernization as well as innovation. As part of CAF's broader strategy to rebrand as well as elevate its competitions, the new design was conceived to amplify the visual impact of African football's most coveted prize. In tennis news now, Novak Djokovic celebrated his 38th birthday with a revenge victory over Matteo Analdi to reach the Geneva Open semi-finals yesterday. Djokovic lost to the Italian in April in what was a third straight loss for the Serbian great during a mixed clay court season. However, Djokovic came through a stern test to damp conditions to beat Analdi 6-4 and 6-4 and continue his French Open preparations in positive fashion. He will face a semi-final against Cameron Norrie of Great Britain, who staged an impressive fight back to beat Australian Alexei Popyrin 7-6 and 6-4. The Brit is into his first semi-final of the season and will be facing Djokovic in that match. Might be a daunting prospect for him as he will take to heart. He will rather take heart from his performance against Alexei Popyrin in that quarterfinal match. Well, in case you missed it, news that broke last night, Real Madrid captain Luka Modric will leave the Spanish Giants after the end of the FIFA Club World Cup campaign. The 39-year-old Croatian midfielder, the 2018 Ballon d'Or winner, will play his final match at Real's Santiago Bernabeu home when they welcome Real Sociedad on Saturday in their final La Liga game of the season. The Croatian has won about 28 trophies, including including 6 Champions League trophies, as well as 4 domestic titles since joining Real Madrid from Spurs back in 2012. Modric also bagged 2 goals, as well as 6 assists in 34 appearances in the Spanish top flight this season alone, as Real were pipped to the title by Barcelona. He also featured in every game as Carlo Ancelotti's side reached the quarterfinals of the UEFA Champions League, where they were beaten 5-1 on aggregate by Arsenal. Real will open their Club World Cup campaign against Saudi Arabia at Club Al Hilal on the 18th of June. They also will be facing Mexico's side Puicheca, as well as RB Salzburg of Australia in the group stages of this year's competition. And finally, the draw for the pool stages of the 2027 Men's Rugby World Cup is set to take place in December, with World Rugby having confirmed the news on Thursday. So the tournament, which will be staged in Australia from the 1st of October to the 13th of November, will then be expanded to take in 24 teams rather than 20 teams, as it has been the case since the 1999 World Cup. The teams will be divided into 6 pools of 4 teams. Now, 16 teams have since qualified for this World Cup, including the 2-time defending champions South Africa, France, New Zealand, Italy, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, Fiji, Australia, England, Argentina, Japan, Georgia, Spain, Portugal, as well as Romania. Meanwhile, the final qualifying tournament will be held in Dubai from the 8th until the 18th of November. With that, it's a wrap from the sports desk at the Sawa. I'm back with a final sports update on Africa Rise and Shine in the next hour. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, simply send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or give us a call. The newsroom line is +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Este é o Caleidoscópio de Canal África, com Remo Samo e João Yabalá.
O surto da cólera em Angola tem causado grande preocupação, afetando já mais de metade das províncias do país. Simultaneamente, a Agência dos Estados Unidos para o Desenvolvimento Internacional, USAID, um dos maiores doadores mundiais de assistência humanitária, decidiu não priorizar os países com maior incidência de malária. Para discutirmos as causas do alastramento da cólera em Angola e os impactos dessa decisão da USAID, convidamos o Dr. Jeremias Agostinho, médico e mestre em saúde pública, para partilhar a sua visão sobre o tema.
A doença, nesse momento, representa o maior risco de saúde pública que nós temos. Nos últimos anos, a nossa preocupação esteve sempre centrada com os casos de malária, os casos de tuberculose e também de infecção por VIH-Sida. A forma como, em pouco menos de 2 meses, os casos de cólera vêm aumentando, acaba por representar, nessa altura, um dos maiores desafios que o país tem. É expectável que, nesta fase, o número de casos venha a aumentar.
De segunda a sexta-feira, das 20 às 21 horas locais, este é o Caleidoscópio de Canal África.
Let's get the update now, or an update, in terms of the world of business. Good morning, Buntle Headbush.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa. Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Vue d'Afrique avec Joël Mouteba.
Alors peut-on considérer cette décision comme un désengagement durable des États-Unis vis-à-vis du développement africain, ou s'agit-il d'un simple réalignement stratégique?
Bon, ça peut être les deux.
à la fois. Donc, au lieu de donner de l'argent à la Banque africaine de développement pour partager en vrac, ils préfèrent maintenant donc cibler les pays partenaires en Afrique. Ça, c'est pour le
réalignement stratégique.
Alors, et aussi, ce n'est pas un désengagement durable, mais je pense que dans les 2 ou 3 prochaines années, il veut d'abord remettre de l'ordre dans ses affaires.
Vue d'Afrique. Du lundi au vendredi de 15h à 16h, temps universel.
Got something to say? Are you passionate about issues that matter?
Do you have a voice that deserves to be heard?
Well, we've got the perfect platform for you. Call in or drop us a WhatsApp on +27 63 406 9126.
And we will call you back.
So you could have your say and be part of the conversation.
30 years of age. I just turned 30 on the 15th of November. So that's who I am, you know.
It's not just talk. It's your chance to air your views.
Share your opinion.
Engage with a community that values your perspective.
Follow us on our social media.
Visit our website at www.channelafrica.co.za
and get ready to share your views
on Channel Africa,
the African perspective.
Business news on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Good morning. South Africa's Parliament's Standing Committee on Finance has cautioned some political parties against frustrating government's plans to generate revenue. Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana announced an increase in the fuel levy during his budget speech before the National Assembly in Cape Town on Wednesday. Some political parties have rejected the increase. The committee's chairperson, Joe Maswanganyi, says some political parties are promoting populist agendas, including opposing government's tax policy.
We should not promote a situation where we don't want the public and the corporates to pay taxes. It will not be right that every time the state talks about increasing a tax, we encourage protest. You are not going to run a state based on populism because there's no state that can function without revenue. Otherwise, if you want to run the government and the state in general based on populism, that you will never raise a tax and you'll never do this, at some state, that state is going to collapse.
Credit rating expert Torsten Henrichs says regulators and politicians can play an important role by encouraging the culture of rating of institutions to unlock funding opportunities in Africa. This emerged on the second day of the Africa Annual Credit Ratings Conference in Cape Town, South Africa. Experts have outlined some of the prerequisites to unlocking domestic bond markets through credit ratings. The meeting concluded yesterday with a focus on shaping the future of credit ratings on the continent. Henrichs says more can be done to create a ratings culture in Africa.
To, for example, create a pan-African regulator for the ratings industry, just like the Europeans have done some years ago, some 10, 15 years ago, with an institution called ESMA, and that's a European-wide regulator for the ratings industry, creating a level playing field across Europe for the industry. I think that would go a long way also in creating this credit and ratings culture in Africa.
Women in Philanthropy South Africa, together with Investec Bank, hosted Women in Business yesterday at a gathering in Johannesburg. The discussion centered around, among other challenges, how to build resilience and foster lasting impact in different economic environments. The platform provided all women philanthropists the opportunity to share their lived experiences. Steering committee member at Women in Philanthropy South Africa, Sinenhlanhla Nene.
My version of a goodie bag is, when people can actually leave feeling, re-energized, because sometimes social impact work is draining. To meet other women who are sharing experiences, who, especially in a climate where things are changing. I mean, 1 minute an organization has funding, the next minute Donald Trump wakes up and he decides that there's no funding anymore. What do you do in a situation like that? It helps build resilient organizations as well to change with the times.
Taking a look at the indicators, $1 Nigeria is trading at 159 naira 35. Botswana 13 pula 32. Kenya, the dollar is at 128 shilling 37. In Zambia 27 kwacha 19. Moving to the BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 reals 65.
Russia 79 rubles 65, India 85 rupees 87, in China 7 yuan 20, South Africa $1 is trading at 17 rand 98 cents. $1 is at 74 pence to the British pound and 88 to the euro. Looking at commodities, gold is trading at $3,297 and platinum at $1,087 per ounce, while the price of Brent crude oil is at $64.08 a barrel this morning. And those are your business news. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Buntle Hedbush.
Business news on Channel Africa.
The African Perspective.
Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Well, one of those stories that matters is a look at some of the stories affecting the African market. So we get a roundup of our markets on this Friday. This is a feature we have every week. And this week we joined on the line by Chantel Marks, Head of Investment and Research at FNB Wealth and Investments. Chantel, thank you for joining us. How are you on this particular Friday, the 23rd of May?
I'm absolutely freezing, but apart from that, I'm very well, thank you.
Yeah, no, we'll have to survive this cold front. I don't know how, but we'll figure it out. Well, thanks for making time for us. Today, let's start with the South African rand remaining steady, of course, after that Ramaphosa-Trump meeting that I think all eyes were glued on. We even forgot about our Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana's speech because of this meeting. What can this be attributed to, the African rand remaining steady?
Well, I think it's a function of two things at the moment, probably three things. So firstly, the rand was a little bit on the undervalued side over the last few months, and there seems to be a bit of a recovery closer towards fair value for the local currency, the South African local currency. The second thing is we've seen a weakening in the US dollar, and that has been supportive of markets globally. It's been a function of money actually leaving the US. A lot of investors are becoming quite uncomfortable with the uncertain policy direction that the US is taking, and they're looking for value elsewhere, and South Africa was a beneficiary of that. And then the third factor, I think, is that there's been a lot of rumblings that the South African Reserve Bank is looking to lower its inflation target. A lower inflation target means that interest rates need to stay higher for longer, and that makes South Africa comparatively attractive if you consider interest returns on capital that is in this country.
On the stock market, the top 40 index was down, however, about 0.7%, even though a trade and investment proposal was submitted between our two presidents, Ramaphosa and Trump. What can we read into this?
So I think when it comes to the equity market in South Africa, it's important to remember that it's quite diverse. And we have quite heavy weightings in companies that are dual listed, with most of their operations actually happening outside of South Africa. So sometimes you get a movement in the equity market that does not necessarily reflect the sentiment around South Africa specifically. So it's kind of a push and pull as well, because some of those big dual listed companies are regarded as rand hedges. So when the rand strengthens, they come under pressure just because of them, the prices being marked to market in terms of their reporting currency that will be usually outside of South Africa and for the most part in Europe. So, yeah, I mean, I think that is probably what explains it best. Where we have seen some support is the resources sector, particularly some continued momentum in the platinum and palladium mining sector. We've seen some support for PGM prices coming through, and that certainly helped that segment of the market.
Bitcoin has hit a new record high as it continues its rally. Where was it before? Where is it now?
So I think there's a lot of interest in Bitcoin because it has done very well. And then you do tend to get a herding effect from investors where fear of missing out starts dominating sentiment. So I would actually ascribe a part of that rise in Bitcoin to in fear of missing out and investor sentiment generally, moving also away from previous high growth sectors like US technology. I would caution though that Bitcoin isn't really correlated to markets, and that makes it very difficult to determine what the direction of that asset class is going to be. It's also very difficult to value. So for now, it just seems as if we're getting continued flows in there, really due to investors looking for alternatives to the US equity market.
There is also growing optimism around the US's crypto regulation. Could that have something to do with this?
So I think that these types of headlines that do perhaps allow investors more comfort when pulling the trigger on an alternative investment like Bitcoin. Perhaps a regulatory framework that makes a little bit more sense and is a little bit more friendly towards crypto exchanges as well as investors holding crypto would place investors that are on the fence around these asset classes into buyers.
Is it indicative also maybe of investors looking for alternative stores of value?
Well, I think it's very difficult to categorize Bitcoin as a store of value at this point in time. The asset class is still very new, and we do see quite wild swings in the price. For that reason, it's not necessarily a safe haven to park your funds, but certainly I think that it's the narrative that's being put out there by crypto bulls as well. So perhaps for those that were on the fence, those looking for value outside of the US technology space and US stock market generally, crypto does offer that haven, but I wouldn't categorize it as a store of value just yet.
I know you said it doesn't have much bearing on the market, but when it comes to rating agencies, in your view, should it influence rating agencies' credit ratings moving forward? It seems like it's going to be something to look in terms of the influence it has in how we handle money.
Yeah, so I think that it depends on whether or not it actually is widely adopted as a means of exchange. So for the time being, it does seem as if it's becoming an alternative investment class that investors are taking seriously. But we haven't really seen widespread adoption in terms of using Bitcoin as money at the till, for example. But it's certainly something that I think regulators and credit rating agencies will look at, particularly if there are a lot of assets that are parked in cryptocurrencies. It will have an impact on flows, I would think.
I think we need a pro-crypto agenda. I don't know what you think about that in terms of moving forward on this topic.
Yeah, I think that it's very important for us to have a crypto agenda and to actually take the asset class a little bit more seriously. There certainly is a lot of interest from investors globally, and I think it's very important for regulators to actually establish that framework globally. You do not want a situation where you don't have the proper regulations in place, and something happens, or there's a flight from the asset class, or there's a specific exchange that's operating in an unscrupulous manner, and you don't have the regulatory backup for it.
Let's move on to oil now. It's edged lower as a response to signs that U.S. President Donald Trump might be pulling back from his efforts in terms of finding solutions or ending the war between Ukraine and Russia. Brent crude oil traded below $66 a barrel.
Yes, I mean, oil is really, the oil price is really a function of demand and supply. Now, supply has been constrained out of Russia because of sanctions. We've also had concerns around supply when it comes to certain areas of the Middle East, where there's also a lot of uncertainty and geopolitical pressure abound. On the demand side, economic growth has been downgraded over the last few months, chiefly because of all the chaos that we've been seeing from a US policy perspective, and that would have weighed on the demand prospects. But you also have a country like Saudi Arabia that continues to push production quite a bit. So the dynamics are quite complex. The demand picture doesn't look great at the moment. The supply picture looks okay. You will tend to see pressure on the oil price on from a supply side perspective if there is a calming of geopolitical pressure, or if Saudi Arabia pushes production, and then you'll see an increase if the opposite happens. But those dynamics are interplaying constantly, so it's very difficult to determine what specific factor is weighing on the oil price on any given day.
Yeah, and as you say, I mean, also those talks are likely to take a long time. So can we see ourselves dealing with expensive crude oil prices?
I think for now, the Saudis are pushing production quite a bit still, and we still have the weak demand outlook from a global economic growth perspective that is basically dragging oil prices lower, and we'll probably see a trade year for quite some time. I think if we also see a resolution to some of this geopolitical tension, you could see further downside near term to the oil price. I think ultimately the only thing that's going to lift the oil price meaningfully is if there are severe supply chain disruptions globally, if we get an escalation in geopolitical matters in the Middle East in particular, or if the Saudis pull back production. Of course, if we get better than expected economic growth, we could also anticipate an increase in the oil price. But for now, it's not necessarily our base case.
As we saw a positive move in the US and China war, were the previous drops in previous crude oil prices, or they remained steady?
So from a geopolitical perspective, a calming of the situation between the US and China will be positive from a growth perspective. So that would naturally result in slightly higher oil prices. But again, the dynamics are so complex because you do have the supply glut coming from the Saudis as well. And then you do have a situation where you still have a lot of uncertainty going on around the geopolitics elsewhere.
Let's move to Ghana now. They've recorded 30% growth in terms of their stock exchange in the first quarter, that is. Attributing factors?
Well, yeah, it's been a very strong performance from the Ghana Stock Exchange. I think that if you look at where the strength has come from, it really has been from the banks. So the banks trading very well. I think a backdrop of better economic growth there, certainly helping out the local financial sector. And then we also had some really good numbers coming through from MTN Ghana. It's a very large company on that stock exchange. And those numbers showed that we continue to see very strong services revenue from MTN Ghana, underpinned by fintech, a continued adoption of their fintech solutions, as well as widespread data adoption and increased data usage from clients in that jurisdiction.
Where does this place the country in terms of West African markets, or the stock markets specifically?
So it has been a clear outperformer year to date and over the last year as well. I think now the question is whether or not that can be sustained. I think it will be a function of stability in the currency, as well as funding in the funding from a fiscal perspective as well.
Could Ghana see itself faring well in terms of stock markets in other regions and maybe even surpassing West African ones?
Yes, so I mean, it depends on how the growth picture plays out and how stable I think matters are from a currency and an inflation perspective, because that has a huge impact on some of these West African stock markets. I think from a company perspective, you would anticipate the banks to continue performing well if conditions remain similar to what they are right now. And we're also still quite positive around the prospects for MTN Ghana. I guess if you look at it relative to other Western African stock markets, Nigeria probably would be the standout to watch. We know there are specific issues in that jurisdiction as well, but some of the larger companies in that stock market have also performed well. I think from a Nigerian perspective, the turn in the oil price higher will be a little bit more, we'll probably see it outperform. But again, I mean, as we mentioned when we spoke about oil, that's not necessarily our base case at the moment.
All right. Well, we'll leave it there for today in terms of our markets. Thank you so much, Chantel, for joining us on Africa Rise and Shine.
It's a massive pleasure.
Chantal Marks is Head of Investment and Research at FNB Wealth and Investments. That's our Friday feature, looking at the markets on the continent. And now it's 8 o'clock Central African time. That means we enter the third and final hour of Africa Rise and Shine. My name is Asanda Beda. If you've just joined us, a very good morning to you. A happy Friday as well. It's the 23rd of May. We'll be covering a few stories in this hour, going back to that Tanzania story again, and others, of course, coming up. And then we have our news updates, our economics updates, as well as sports updates. Let's say good morning to Onel Nzinzi then for that news update, and then sports headlines by Musibudi Makura will follow.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Nigeria's ruling All Progressives Congress Party has endorsed President Bola Tinubu to run for a second and final term at the next elections due in early 2027. Tinubu won the last presidential vote in February 2023, which his two main rivals unsuccessfully challenged in court, alleging the vote was rigged. Tinubu says he won fairly. The APC said at a summit in the country's capital, Abuja, that it wanted Tinubu to continue with reforms that the government says have rebooted the economy after removing a costly petrol subsidy and liberalizing the exchange rate. President in Nigeria can serve a maximum of 2 4-year terms. The senator in the Democratic Republic of Congo has approved a government request that former President Joseph Kabila be stripped of his parliamentary immunity and charged with treason. Kinshasa accused the DRC former leader of support of the M23 rebels. The BBC's Damascene Debussy.
Kabila has lost the honorary lifetime senatorial immunity he had been granted in 2019 when he left office, paving the way for him to stand trial. But his current whereabouts are unconfirmed. Mr. Kabila has previously denied links to the rebels. If Mr. Kabila stands trial, he will become the first former head of state in the DRC to face treason charges. But analysts warn a trial could destabilize the country. The government has not yet confirmed when a formal indictment or trial could take place.
The African National Congress Secretary General Fikile Mbalula says evidence presented by U.S. President Donald Trump on Wednesday to support his claim of white genocide in South Africa shows that he is misinformed. Trump played a video of the Economic Freedom Fighters leader Julius Malema singing the Kill the Boer chant to support his claim of genocide. President Ramaphosa rejected the claims, emphasizing that the inflammatory rhetoric from certain groups does not reflect the government's policy. Balula says it's absurd for Trump to confuse crime with genocide.
What is basing his falsification on? First, it was unsubstantiated. Those clips about the leader of the opposition and 5-year memory of white Afrikaners or farmers marching alongside the road and the widths on the side, saying that this signifies the death of white farmers. That showed that the President of the United States was out of depth. He should have brought something to the fore.
Tanzania has released a Kenyan activist who had been arrested after he tried to attend a hearing in the treason case against a detained opposition leader in Dar es Salaam. The Kenya National Commission on Human Rights said it had received Boniface Mwangi in Kenya's southeastern Kwale County yesterday afternoon. Kenya's Foreign Minister Musalia Mudavadi also confirmed Mwangi's release. Tabiso Lihuku reports.
Rights activist Hussein Khalid has tweeted that Boniface Mwangi has been severely tortured by Tanzanian security agents and could barely walk. Mwangi had attempted to observe opposition leader Tundu Lissu's first court appearance on Monday in a case that has spotlighted a growing crackdown on opponents of President Samia Suluhu Hassan. He was arrested on allegations of providing false information to gain entry into the country. Lissu, who was shot 16 times in a 2017 attack and came second in Tanzania's last presidential poll, was charged with the treason.
Lastly, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has accused some of his country's closest allies of siding with rapists and baby killers after they criticized Israel's conduct in Gaza. On Monday, Britain, France and Canada condemned the expanded Israeli military operation and the denial of humanitarian aid to civilians in the territory. Netanyahu said the leaders of the three countries had bought into Hamas propaganda.
I say to President Macron, Prime Minister Carney, and Prime Minister Starmer, when mass murderers, rapists, baby killers, and kidnappers thank you, you're on the wrong side of justice. You're on the wrong side of humanity. And you're on the wrong side of history.
For any news stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us at +27 11 714 4459. Channel Africa News, I am Onele Ntsinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news this hour, the 2025 FIFA Cup will have a record prize fund of more than $36.5 million. And Novak Djokovic is into the semi-finals of the Geneva Open. Details coming up at 8:30.
Vue d'Afrique avec Joël Mouteba.
Alors peut-on considérer cette décision comme un désengagement durable des États-Unis vis-à-vis du développement africain ou s'agit-il d'un simple réalignement stratégique?
Bon, ça peut être les deux à la fois. Donc, au lieu de donner de l'argent à la Banque africaine de développement pour partager en vrac, ils préfèrent maintenant donc cibler les pays partenaires en Afrique. Ça, c'est pour le réalignement stratégique. Alors, et aussi, ce n'est pas un désengagement durable, mais je pense que dans les 2 ou 3 prochaines années, il veut d'abord remettre de l'ordre dans ses affaires.
Vue d'Afrique. Du lundi au vendredi de 15h à 16h, temps universel.
Você é fluente em português? É apaixonado por rádio e quer trabalhar na África do Sul? Você tem documentos que o qualificam para trabalhar na África do Sul? Nesse caso, podemos ter uma oportunidade para você trabalhar no Canal África. Envie seu currículo e demonstração para Canal África @ newsroom@channelafrica.co.za. Lembre-se, se você não receber alguma resposta nossa em 14 dias, isso significa que você não foi selecionado. Canal África, a perspectiva africana.
Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 Central African Time on Channel Africa.
7 minutes past 8 Central African time it is, and let's talk about the meeting between South Africa's president and US President Donald Trump. So all eyes are on this as President Cyril Ramaphosa and US President Donald Trump, and it has been one of the biggest stories this week. Ramaphosa traveled to Washington to meet Trump over the American president's allegations of genocide in South Africa. Former South African ambassador to the U.S., Welile Nhlapo, had warned that the concern going into the meeting would be if the U.S. attempts to influence South Africa's diplomatic relationships with other nations. Ambassador Nhlapo now joins us to discuss the events leading to the South Africa-US meeting and the events at the media briefing. And what now for South Africa or US relations? Ambassador, thank you so much for joining us. How are you this Friday?
I'm fine, thanks. And you?
I'm fine. Thank you so much for making time for us. Firstly, what can we read into the different approaches between these two heads of state, Ramaphosa and Trump, in terms of how they conduct meetings with their counterparts that could either prove to be compatible or detrimental to these talks? Ramaphosa seems to be more of a procedural guy. Let's take our time. And Trump seems to be more results-driven. I want to see differences now. What's your take?
No, I think to put it even much more appropriately and better, President Ramaphosa behaved and conducted himself like a statesman. and obeyed and acknowledged the decorum and protocols of the Oval Office as the highest office in the land. And in his engagement, that's what informed his attitude and behavior. On the other hand, unfortunately, as it has become customary, the President of the United States turns the Oval Office into a bully ring where he tries to intimidate and totally disrespect his interlocutors or his guests by throwing a lot of uncontested or unverified accusations against them in order to unsettle them before he tries to extract whatever he wants from them.
Do you still have the concern that the U.S. might attempt to influence South Africa's diplomatic relationships with other nations after what we've seen in terms of yesterday's meeting?
He didn't even have time to go that far. His major concern was to try and justify why he has invited, or the administration has invited, 49 Afrikaners for a special refugee dispensation at the time when they had made the ruling to deal with immigrants in a particular way, and particularly refugees that are currently in the U.S. and those who would be potentially trying to find refuge in that country. And he therefore had to single out the footage that he displayed to prove that, in fact, there were genuine refugees running away from persecution and killings. But unfortunately, he used a very strong term to describe their experiences as genocide. Nothing anywhere close to that. And sought to present information and footage that, in fact, disqualified the whole attempt.
Let's talk about one of the images you speak of that was shown by Trump to support his white genocide movie script, as I would refer to it. That was about violence against women in the Democratic Republic of Congo, showing white people being buried. Can we expect a retractment from the U.S. president?
Well, that is the unfortunate part of it, and it has become very characteristic that accusations are thrown at people without any fact checking. And there is no remorse on any apology afterwards. We saw that during the campaign. I don't know how many times there have been all sorts of things said about people, which on fact check, it was discovered that there was no grain of truth in them. This is a very unfortunate character of a man who's supposed to be occupying the highest office in that important country.
Let's go back to this issue. Do you think that Trump is more angry about South Africa's genocide case against Israel in relation to the war on Gaza? Why he claims there's a genocide against white Afrikaners? Because he seems to be punting this thing.
No, once you take up Israel to the ICJ on genocide, and you are able to, with evidence, prove, in fact, that genocide is being committed against the Palestinians, and more people joining to provide the same evidence to testify that this is a fact. Now, who is the enabler? Without the support militarily and otherwise, politically, including diplomatically, by the United States administrations, Biden before, and Trump in this case, I think it is normal to expect them to feel aggrieved and begin to fear that the finger is being indirectly pointed towards them, because they are the enablers of what is genocide that is committed against the Palestinians in the Middle East, and particularly in Gaza.
The contradiction of Trump welcoming these, in inverted commas, refugees from South Africa, while removing protections for those from other countries who are fleeing real conflict and persecution. Over 800,000 people no longer have protection from deportation from the U.S., from places like Haiti, Cameroon, Afghanistan, and Venezuela. What do you make of this?
Well, these are the questions that people in the United States, citizens of the United States, are asking, including members of Congress, by the way. Just a day before this meeting with our president, the same question was raised with Mark Rubio, who is the Secretary of State in the United States administration, as to why now? Why are they making this preferential treatment to these white Afrikaners from South Africa? Whereas during the struggle against apartheid, with all the atrocities that were committed towards black people, why the same was not extended to them? And he pretended not to know anything about it. And he was told point blank that is precisely what happened. And that today, it is strange that the United States will make an exception on false basis of some genocide that is taking place against a particular group of whites who the United States have to protect by giving them refugee status. I think this is an issue that he was trying to display to the American public, that indeed there is a justification and a reasonable basis for the administration to extend this particular refugee status to these Afrikaners.
To counter that thought or belief that he has, South Africa, the crime in this country is not politically motivated. A majority of the crimes that are committed are against black people. On the other hand as well, white South Africans, there are only 7% of them in our population, yet they own over 70% of land. Do you think Donald Trump wants to hear this, and will he be willing to listen when he's being corrected in terms of his incorrect stance?
Well, I think it is just a matter of record that whatever attempt was being made to let him see the other side and of the reality of what is happening in South Africa, he simply was not interested. That was very disappointing. He was not interested, totally unfazed. Even when people from the same community tried to explain to him exactly and precisely what was happening, he was not interested. But because he was speaking to the American audience to justify his actions of making exception to these Afrikaners that they have accepted as refugees, he decided to be tone deaf about it, and persisted in throwing around all those accusations and displaying the footage and pictures that he was banditing around in the course of the meeting.
If you've just joined us on Africa Rise and Shine, we're in conversation with former South African ambassador to the U.S., Welile Nhlapho, talking the meeting between South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa and U.S. President Donald Trump. One of the biggest stories this week, probably going into next week. So, Ambassador, let's talk about U.S. aid cuts, which have put over 8,000 workers in South Africa's national HIV program out of work. What's the best way to address this particular issue?
At the time when I arrived as ambassador to Washington, the issue was on the agenda. There were serious discussions between us and the American administration, particularly the Department of Health and the Department of Commerce, on AGOA and PEPFAR. We managed to convince them about the need for the continuation of supporting the programs that we have rolled out in order to deal with HIV and AIDS. And I think we succeeded to do that. But all the time, the warning was always there that because we can be able from our own budget to deal with certain aspects of what they were funding, that there will be a time when, in fact, that funding will be reduced or ceased. We then went into an agreement with them on the basis of areas where we thought they could shift some of the funding into areas where we were able to identify the gaps that we could not deal with from our own fiscus. And that became the arrangement on the basis of which we proceeded. On AGOA, it was the same thing. They had warned, even at that time, that at the time of the review of AGOA, there is a possibility that our position or our continued benefiting from tariff-free arrangements under AGOA might cease, because this was a particular dispensation that was designed to assist least developed countries to get their goods tariff-free into the United States, and that we were a middle-income country. And therefore, it will be desirable to consider at a particular stage having a specific trade agreement that will be U.S.-South Africa because of the nature of the trade between the two countries. And therefore, deal with them purely on a bilateral basis while still maintaining aspect of a favored nation status that we still continue to enjoy. That was the position. And I think what the delegation did by presenting to the U.S. administration, particularly the Department of Commerce, a framework within which we can continue with these mutually beneficial trade arrangements that will be suitable for both of us. Because for us, trade and investment is very critical for addressing some of the root causes of the conflicts in our country, and particularly the structural challenges of our economy that fuels some of the social ills that we're trying to deal with, including rampant crime, amongst other things.
What do you see the future of that AGOA agreement being then of 2000?
Well, AGOA agreement is not a bilateral agreement between South Africa and the United States. It is an agreement that has been extended to a select number of countries, not all countries, select number of countries, on the basis of the criterion that has been developed by the U.S. Congress of countries that will then benefit from tariff-free arrangements. And that is what is under review, which would come under review in November. And already, as I am saying, a signal was already given to us in 2007 when I arrived in Washington, that consideration at some point will be made to exclude us on the basis of the size of our economy and the fact that we can be able to enter into a separate bilateral arrangement, which is where I think is the point that we have reached with the reports by Minister of Trade, Mr. Paksau, on the conversations that they've had with his counterpart and the proposals that they have made to the U.S. administration through the Secretary of Commerce, including, by the way, a possibility of a continuation under AGOA. So the options have been left open and the negotiations will have to continue on the baskets of goods that will have to be subjected to whatever tariffs or any other regime, trade regime that will arrive at, which is mutually beneficial for both countries.
So as much as discussions are open and so are opportunities in terms of AGOA, could this meeting between Ramaphosa and Trump have any negative impacts in terms of those other select countries, those other 31 countries under AGOA?
Well, not necessarily. It will depend on the United States whether they still maintain the same criterion and will continue to invite the same countries or reduce some of them or add more, because they do that at their own discretion. But given the approach that they have taken now, the manner in which they have been looking at their own domestic priorities above any assistance they would be willing to continue giving in terms of programs that they were financing to many of the developing countries and international organizations that are dealing with humanitarian situations, the chances are that there will be a reduction or a maintenance of that status quo. Let's wait until the Africa-US summit that they are planning to call. It might give us a better signal as to which direction the relationship between Africa and the US will be going and where AGOA will be placed within that context.
After Wednesday's meeting, Ambassador, do you think our President Ramaphosa will in some way edit his objectives going into this meeting of originally preserving strategic partnerships, of course, allaying fears or removing negative sentiments on political narratives around the Afrikaners issue, and advocating for continued support on trade, security, partnership, and democracy? Or do you think these will remain as they are?
I think if you observe how he conducted himself and how he presented the case of our relationship, particularly when it comes to trade and investment, and the mutual beneficiary arrangements that are in place in terms of employment creation by our companies investing in the United States and vice versa. He tried by all means to make the point that we indeed, we do need each other and that the relationship can be improved and that whatever other difficulties are in the way of improving those relationships, they should be placed on the table and we would be prepared to engage those issues.
I don't know if you have a comment or an opinion on the fact that most of these meetings between heads of states and Washington were closed meetings, and this time it was a live streaming meeting. What do you think of that decision at the White House?
No, I think that is his new style of doing things. Whenever guests are being welcomed to the White House, it is customary that there is a press briefing about the purpose of the meeting and questions and answers taken to a selected core of media that constitute the White House press corps. And of course, visiting press accompanying the head of state or head of government that is engaging with the President of the United States. It is common and normal. But from the time of the meeting with the President of the Ukraine, the tone and approach became different. We saw the treatment that President Zelensky got. And in the case of our president, it was a bit toned down. But of course, he did lay an ambush in the fact that he then brought into that room that footage in order to prove a point, as I said earlier. I think it was meant more for the domestic audience, but also to try and put our president on the spot, because we have persistently been saying that there is no such genocide taking place in our country. And that we can be in a position to prove that. So he wanted to embarrass our president by putting up that footage. But unfortunately, I think he was ill-briefed, and the choice of the footage did not assist him very much in getting his point across.
Right. Let's leave it there for now, Ambassador. We really thank you for your time, and I'm sorry to cut you there, but we are completely out of time. Do have a great rest of your Friday and a rested weekend.
Well, today is Africa Day, and I hope I'm going to have a serious reflection on a number of issues that are confronting this continent and be able to celebrate this day.
Absolutely, and the Thabo Mbeki Africa Day lecture happening in Tanzania as well. It all comes together. South African ambassador to the US, former rather, Welile Nhlapo joining us. It's 32 minutes past 8. Let's get our news headlines.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Nigeria's ruling All Progressives Congress Party has endorsed President Bola Tinubu to run for a second and final term at the next elections due in early 2027. The APC at the summit in the country's capital, Abuja, said that it wanted Tinubu to continue with reforms that the government says have rebooted the economy. Senators in the Democratic Republic of Congo have approved a government request that former President Joseph Kabila be stripped of his parliamentary immunity and charged with treason. And the man suspected of gunning down two Israeli embassy staff in Washington on Wednesday night has been charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Let's get our sports update. Here's Musubudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Very good morning once again from the sports desk for the final time this morning on Africa Rise and Shine. We'll start with this story. So CAF's head of television as well as communications, Luxolo September, has revealed the recruitment of veteran South African administrator Derek Blackensee is part of continuing to grow the federation. Now, this was revealed at the unveiling of a new CAF Champions League trophy in Johannesburg ahead of the first leg, a final between Mamelodi Sundowns as well as Pyramids FC to be played tomorrow at Loftus Versfeld in the country's capital city, Pretoria. September previously worked with Blackensee at the Premier Soccer League before heading to CAF. He says the appointment is part of enhancing African football.
We've just hired a South African, Derek Blackensee, to head our professional club football, because we are really serious about this part. We're looking at how we can give it a strong, not only in sentiments, but also ensuring that we are listening across the board to what people are saying. Just the design of the trophy alone took forever for people to decide and discuss about it. Obviously, there's a big discussion about how should interclub football look like in Africa. There is an African Football League. There is a Total Energies CAF Champions League. There is a Total Energies CAF Confederations Cup. How do we look at these products and how do we ensure that each of them has an identity?
Meanwhile, September also put into context why CAF felt the need to create a new trophy ahead of the final in Pretoria and in Cairo.
The launch of the trophy is staying with the tradition. The launch of the new Total Energies CAF Champions League trophy is staying with the tradition, but modernizing it, giving it a nice modern look, new look that is more modern, more sophisticated, but also staying true to the tradition of African football. We're very excited about today because it heralds a new era whereby African football, the investment of African football, how it is received globally is also going to be changing.
And on to this now, the 2025 FIFA Arab Cup will have a record prize fund of more than $36.5 million, with Qatar's local organizing committee for the regional tournament announcing this on Thursday. The competition, which features senior men's national teams from the 22-member Union of Arab Football Associations, representing both Asia as well as Africa, take place from the 1st until the 18th of December. Having taken over the organization from UEFA, which initially ran the event, FIFA has been in charge since FIFA has been in charge since the tournament's revival in 2021, when it had also reported a prize fund of $25.5 million. The draw, meanwhile, will be held in Doha this coming Sunday, with defending champions Algeria amongst the favourites. Still on football news, Real Madrid captain Luka Modric will leave the Spanish Giants after the end of the FIFA Club World Cup. The 39-year-old Croatian midfielder, the 2018 Ballon d'Or winner, will play his final match at the Santiago Bernabeu when they face off with Real Sociedad on Saturday in the La Liga final game of the season. The Croatian, who has won 28 trophies, including 6 Champions League as well as 4 domestic titles since joining Real Madrid from Spurs in 2012. Modric bagged 2 goals as well as 6 assists in 34 appearances in the Spanish top flight this season as Real were pipped to the title by Barcelona. He also featured in every game as Carlo Ancelotti's side reached the quarterfinals of the Champions League, where they were beaten 5-1 on aggregate by Arsenal. Real will open their Club World Cup campaign against Saudi Arabia's Al Hilal on the 18th of June and then face off with Mexico's Pachuca as well as RB Salzburg of Austria in the group stages of this year's tournament. And finally, on the tennis court, Novak Djokovic celebrated his 38th birthday with a revenge victory over Matteo Analdi to reach the Geneva Open semi-finals. Djokovic lost to the Italian in April in what was a 3rd straight loss for the Serbian great during a mixed clay court season. However, Djokovic came through a stern test to damp conditions, this to beat Analdi 6-4 and 6-4 and continue his French Open preparations in positive fashion. He will face in the semi-final Cameron Norrie of Great Britain, who staged an impressive fight back to beat Australian Alexei Popyrin 7-5 and 6-4. The Brit is into his first semi-final of the season, and while facing Djokovic is a daunting prospect, he will take heart from his performance. And that's a wrap of your sports news this morning on Africa Rise and Shine. More sporting updates coming up in the next hour with the on the Move team. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, our email address is newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Mosibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Africa. It's time to plug into the heartbeat of the continent. Tune in to Channel Africa, your go-to radio station that broadcasts in 5 different languages.
L'Afrique du Sud célèbre la journée nationale du
kabla hujaitwa kwa jina la Double K Tamo kutuli bwanji ndi Partido Africano da Independência da Guiné.
See, Channel Africa represents every corner of this amazing land. From Lagos to Cape Town, Nairobi to Dakar, we've got you covered with the freshest news, music, and cultures. So, turn up the volume, feel the rhythm. Enjoy the conversation. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Let's get our economics update now with Buntle Headbush for the last time on Africa Rise and Shine this Friday.
Business news on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Thanks, Asanda, and a very good morning to our listeners. South Africa's Mineral and Petroleum Resources Minister Beda insists that his department is monitoring mining companies. This after the Mining Affected Communities in Action released a report that revealed that 11 mining companies across the country fulfilled less than a quarter of their legally binding social and labor plans. SLPs are plans which show how the mines will contribute to the development of the communities around them. Minister Mandashe says the social labor plan is a thorny issue.
Social and labor plan is quite a complex issue because it is dynamic. The first dynamic is that sometimes when you go with SLPs in communities, community leaders want money to go to them in the hand. And our approach to social and labor plans is that don't build small projects, build significant and impactful projects. That's why the majority of mining companies build schools, build clinics, fence fields for food production. So that is actually improving every day and we're monitoring it every day.
South Africa's Parliament's Standing Committee on Finance has cautioned some political parties against frustrating government's plans to generate revenue. Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana announced an increase in the fuel levy during his budget speech before the National Assembly in Cape Town on Wednesday. Some political parties have rejected the increase. The committee's chairperson, Joe Maswanganyi, says some political parties are promoting populist agendas, including opposing government's tax policy.
We should not promote a situation where we don't want the public and the corporate and the state in general, based on populism, that you will never raise a tax and you never do this. As some state, that state is going to collapse.
Egypt's central bank has cut its key interest rates by 100 basis points. The bank says the cut signals a shift towards monetary easing as inflationary pressures ease and Egypt's economic recovery continues. The Monetary Policy Committee cut the overnight deposit rate to 24% and the lending rate to 25%. This is its second decrease this year after having left it unchanged for a year. German investment company Union Investments has cut its stake in Total Energies following fresh allegations of abuse at a $15 billion project in East Africa. The allegations made by non-profit Just Finance International concern the Kingfisher oil site in Uganda, which is part of the East African crude oil pipeline project in which Total Energies has a 62% stake. Sisi Sahalo has more.
Total Energies declared force majeure on its LNG project in Mozambique because of a major raid by Islamist terrorists against the town of Palma. The company says the security situation has now improved, hence it is seeking to have the force majeure lifted. It says it will be up to the government of Mozambique to approve lifting of this force majeure. The Mozambique LNG project, which is budgeted at $20 billion, began with the discovery of over 65 trillion cubic feet of natural gas in the Rovuma Basin.
Japan's new agriculture minister, Shinjiro Koizumi, has pledged immediate rice relief for consumers to prevent a shift to foreign brands. Koizumi said he would quickly move rice from government stockpiles to store shelves where they would be offered at prices significantly lower than current levels. Soaring rice prices, due in part to crop damage from extreme heat and additional demand from a boom in tourism, have become a major concern for Japanese consumers as well as the government. The government has been releasing some of its stockpiled rice since March, but that has yet to translate to lower supermarket prices. Now, for a look at our indicators this morning, $1 in Nigeria is trading at 159 naira 35. In Botswana, it's at 13 pula 32. Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 37. And in Zambia, it's at 27 kwacha 19. The BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 reals 65. Russia is 79 rubles 65. India, 85 rupees 87. In China, it's 7 yuan 20. And South Africa, $1 is trading at 17 rand 98 cents. $1 is trading at 74 pence to the British pound and 88 to the euro. Taking a look at the commodities this morning, gold is trading at $3,297 and platinum at $1,087 per ounce, while the price of Brent crude oil is at $64.08 a barrel. And those are your business news this morning. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Bontle Headbush.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 Central African Time on Channel Africa.
47 minutes past 8 Central African time it is, and various events are taking place in Tanzania ahead of the annual Thabo Mbeki Africa Day lecture. That's going to be tomorrow on Saturday. The lecture is to be held under the theme, The State of the Continent, and it will take place at the Julius Nyerere International Convention Center. It's hosted by the University of South Africa, or UNISA, in partnership with the Thabo Mbeki Foundation, the government of Tanzania, and the Mwalimu Nyerere Foundation. We now cross to our colleague and Rise and Shine partner, Peter Ndoro, who is at the wreath-laying and tree-planting ceremony at the Solomon Mahlangu campus in Morogoro, Tanzania. As we spoke earlier in the show on this topic to say we're going to be crossing and getting more details later from our colleagues there. We're going to try and get a hold of them on the line to find out what's happening. Of course, yesterday, our former South African President Thabo Mbeki saying that the historic importance of this particular place where Peter is going to be crossing to us from, the Solomon Mahlangu campus in Morogoro, Tanzania, is significant for the continent, and it should be documented, even saying that television documentaries should be made about it. And he was speaking ahead of a wreath laying as well as this tree planting ceremony at the campuses, Sokoine University of Agriculture. And this campus, we understand, was crucial in the fight for better education for the African National Congress and the exiles from this ANC who were forced to South Africa during the apartheid regime. Peter's joining us now, our colleague and Rise and Shine partner. Good morning to you over there in nice and warm Tanzania, we understand. How are you? Hello, Peter, can you hear me? All right, we're going to figure out what's going on with the lines there, or in terms of us being heard by Peter, coming to us from Tanzania. And there is a wreath-laying event that happened yesterday. Today, there's a tree planting ceremony as well. It's at the Solomon Mahlangu campus in Morogoro in Tanzania. It's been a lead-up to tomorrow's event, which will be the main lecture, the 15th session of the Thabo Mbeki Africa Day Lecture since the week began. More notably, on Wednesday, the former president Thabo Mbeki engaging students and scholars. You can't be at a university, I guess, and not speak to the young ones or the youth. The University of Dar es Salaam. So there was a dialogue there that underscored the necessity for the continent to self-organize in order to advance Africa's developmental ambitions. And I would have loved to be in that one to hear what the responses were from the floor, from the youth on this dialogue. But Peter will give us updates and as we catch on with him now. Peter, are you there?
Hi there. Do you want to elevate your business and give it a voice in South Africa and Africa as a whole? Well, in that case, let Channel Africa make this a possibility. Channel Africa is willing to advertise your business for as little as 30,000 rands or $1,719.18. To get access to these great rates, send all requests to mukwenata@SABC. That's MOKOENATA@SABC. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Got something to say? Are you passionate about issues that matter? Do you have a voice that deserves to be heard? Well, we've got the perfect platform for you. Call in or drop us a WhatsApp on +27 63 406 9126 and we will call you back so you could have your say and be part of the conversation.
30 years of age. I just turned 30 on the 15th of November. So that's who I am, you know.
It's not just talk. It's your chance to air your views. Share your opinion. Engage with the community that values your perspective. Follow us on our social media. Visit our website at www.channelafrica.co.za and get ready to share your views on Channel Africa, the African perspective. Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Well, let's try again and cross over to Tanzania at we are at the wreath-laying ceremony and tree planting at the Solomon Mahlangu campus in Morogoro, Tanzania. Of course, this is part of the events taking place ahead of that main event, which will be tomorrow, the 15th Thabo Mbeki Africa Day Lecture in Tanzania. As we say good morning to our colleague and Rise and Shine partner, Peter. How are you, Mr. Ndoro?
Very good morning, Jambo. Habari yako?
Jambo. Thank you so much. Well, I don't know if I can thank you because this is your job.
It is hot. It is humid. But it's very, very exciting to be in Tanzania. And, when we look at the history of liberation struggles, particularly in our region, Tanzania and Mwalimu Julius Nyerere and the contribution that Tanzanians made for our liberation is immeasurable. And so it's good at this time in our country's history to come to a country like Tanzania to have conversations such as this. And I have with me William Lishilo, who's the Vice President of Government Relations and Community Business Partner, Sustainability and Corporate Affairs at Anglo Gold Ashanti, to talk to us a little bit about the round table, which is currently underway right now in Dar es Salaam. Thanks so much indeed for joining us, and welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Peter. It's an opportunity and an honor to speak to you.
All right. So Anglo Gold Ashanti has been working across the continent for decades now. Tell me a little bit about why you've partnered with the Thabo Mbeki Foundation to have conversations and roundtables such as this, particularly at an interesting year for the continent, with South Africa leading with the G20 presidency.
Thank you very much, Peter. Anglo Gold Ashanti, it's the fourth biggest gold company in the world, and we operate in Africa and other continents, but mainly in Africa, where 60% of our production comes out of Africa. We have operations in Tanzania, in Ghana, in Guinea, and in Egypt. So partnering with Thabo Mbeki Foundation is a process that which we started in 2023 with the 13th lecture in Guinea, where we partnered with Thabo Mbeki Foundation, and we're doing it here again. And the reason why we're doing this, we see the vision, we see the value that which the foundation is bringing in Africa, in bringing Africa together, in ensuring that the resources that are in Africa are used for the benefit of Africans. That's the first point. But secondly, the community in which we operate in, actually we believe will be better off if we collaborate together and we look at the use of such resources collectively as business. Hence, we are partnering in this roundtable here in Tanzania to bring up across different businesses to share ideas, to say how can we strategically look at African resources, businesses, and increase investments in Africa in the context of G20. What advantages can we take as Africa, with South Africa being the chairman of G20? What can we do together? How can we partner with governments? How can we partner with communities to ensure a better Africa?
As a Pan-African business, you have your hand on the pulse of the continent in a way that a lot of corporates don't. Is there a sense, do you think, that the continent is behind the South African G20 presidency, that they feel that there's a stake for them? The African Union is a part of that story as well. But South Africa as president, do the other countries, corporates that you're engaged with, feel very much a part that this is not just a South African presidency, but an African presidency?
I think there is a sense of ownership of the G20 presidency of South Africa by all African countries, because it's one Africa that which will benefit out of this. You would have heard our president in conversation with Donald Trump 2 days ago, urging him in terms of partnership, in terms of handing over back, because South Africa represents Africa, and the G20 presidency, in my view, and in the business circles, it's not only viewed as a South African presidency or chairmanship, but it's viewed as an African collective chairmanship and presidency, that which would bring together Africa, increase investments, and create a better living conditions for Africans.
What would you like to see corporates do more in terms of growing the spirit of Pan-Africanism?
I think I would like to see more governments creating an enabling environment that which will allow business to grow, business to thrive. Regulatory environment that will enable business to actually do what they do best, because business does not do politics, but governments do politics and policy, which will allow and enable business to grow. And once that environment is created, Africa will grow, businesses will grow, businesses will pay taxes, and communities will grow. And that's how I see it happening. We need an enabling environment, but we also need good strategic leadership from our governments in Africa to ensure that investment is open and also protected by the governments in Africa.
So the annual lecture is happening tomorrow. What are you hoping will come out of it?
What I've seen in the past with the Thabo Mbeki Foundation is that what comes out of the lectures, it's not just a theory, it's not just a talk show, but it's processes that which are taken forward, where the foundation and ourselves, we engage outside the lecture and take the lessons learned and ensure and say, how do we actually utilize the information that comes out of the lecture, the information that comes out of this roundtable, so that it's not only becoming a talk show, but we continuously partner with Thabo Mbeki Foundation to take key elements of the stories, that which we can say, then what do we do with them, and put up programs in place. Hence, we work with UNISA as well.
Mr. Lishila, we're going to have to leave it there, but thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you very much, Peter. I appreciate it.
And that's where we're going to leave it from here in Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, former capital, but very much still the commercial capital of the country, and the venue for the annual Thabo Mbeki lecture, which will be taking place in this city tomorrow. We'll have more details on that through the course of the day right here on Channel Africa Radio, where we bring you the African perspective. And today, live from Tanzania.
I'm
Back
sure
to
you're
you,
enjoying the warm weather
Asanda.
there. I don't know if you can hear me. Can you hear me, Peter? All right. No, I don't think he can hear me. But anyway, he was rubbing it in that it's nice and warm there while we're dealing with the cold front. All the best there, colleague. And of course, stay with Channel Africa. As he says, we'll be updating you on the events that are transpiring there. Well, thank you for joining us for this entire week on Africa Rise and Shine on this Friday. We say goodbye from me, Asanda, Beda, and the team, and Peter, all the way in Tanzania. Join us on Monday, 6 till 9 on Africa Rise and Shine. Coming up is On the Move with Benjamin Mushatama and Palesa Tau. Right now, it's 9 o'clock Central African time, so it's news time. Here's Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News. The African perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Looking at your top stories, Nigeria's ruling All Progressive Party endorses President Bola Tinubu to run for his second and final term, and man suspected of gunning down 2 Israeli embassy staff in Washington is charged. Your latest news. Greetings to our listeners. Nigeria's ruling All Progressives Congress Party has endorsed President Bola Tinubu to run for his second and final term at the next elections due in early 2027. Tinubu won the last presidential vote in February 2023, which his 2 main rivals unsuccessfully challenged in court, alleging the votes were rigged. Tinubu said he won fairly. The APC said at a summit in the country's capital, Abuja, that it wanted Tinubu to continue with reforms that the government says have rebooted the economy after removing a costly petrol subsidy and liberalizing the exchange